literal ghost. No panic, no screaming. Bro just starts grinding monsters like it's a chill side quest. One evolution later, vampire. A few more steps, undead king. And what does he do with god tier power? Farms, makes friends. Zero drama. Welcome to the chillest undead story ever. Let's go. This story begins with Sebel telling his granddaughter, Lifa, that the Abyss Forest is the largest magical world, home to a labyrinth of turn. Was it true that a house had been built in this forest? The girl answered that it was. They would soon reach that place. The grandfather thought that even the previous demon lord he had once served had been afraid to enter here. Finally, Lifa said, "Here it is, the house." Sebel looked at the tall gates, behind which lay a sturdy building, and wondered in surprise, is this an illusion? He had to find out who built it. The old man decisively grasped the gate bars and opened them. As he approached the building, Sebel noticed that he was having difficulty walking, unable to breathe, and felt a sense of pressure in the air. He turned to his granddaughter and told her that if anything went wrong, she should run away. Thus began their first meeting with the demon lord. The protagonist, Sigmund, looking around in the pitch darkness, terrified, wondering where he was. In the forest? What kind of interesting forest was this? An eerie atmosphere permeated everything. He needed to find some shelter quickly. He rushed forward and suddenly saw a cave in front of him. Running inside, he noted that he needed to calm down. No one was following him, and the cave was quite deep, but he was afraid they would find him if he didn't hide. He needed to move on. Along the way, the protagonist noticed that there were no signs of anything strange here. But what was going on? It seemed like he went to bed right after work yesterday. He reached out to touch the walls, and seeing the outline of the wall through his skin, MC panicked and exclaimed, "Is he transparent? That can't be. What if he died? He can't even see his own feet." The protagonist clutched his head and said in confusion, "Did he die? How could this happen?" He couldn't remember his own name at all, let alone how he got here. Who the hell was he? At that moment, a system window appeared next to him, and a voice informed him that his name was unknown. His race was a ghost, meaning a dead soul affected by dense magic and transformed into a demon. He had a level 1 touch skill, and his name was Soul from Another World. Sigmund said in surprise, "A game screen or something like that, right?" So he learned he was a ghost from another world. So this world was different from the one he was in. The protagonist read up on what a ghost was again, and was surprised. Ghosts are demons? However, why was there no information about his identity and his status? He didn't like that he didn't even have a name, so he needed to choose one. This was his new life in another world, even if he was dead. As far as he could remember, he really liked video games and heroic stories. "I should name myself something cool, like Sigmund." MC poked at the system screen and fainted. When he came to his senses and realized what was going on, he was very surprised. What a twist. Even ghosts can faint. What if they can die again? At that moment, the system window activated, revealing that he was now a named monster of the singularity. He had overcome extinction and transformed into a monster with his own name, transcended the boundaries of existence, and was able to choose a unique evolutionary path along their evolutionary tree. MC exclaimed in surprise, "A named monster? Was he going to disappear soon?" Okay, he needed to calm down. There were monsters in this world, or demons. The presence he felt in the forest was probably their magical power. Ghosts are demons too. If they can be killed, like in the game, then being in the forest in the presence of a ghost is dangerous. Of course, he didn't want to die every time, so his only option was to go deeper into the cave. Moving forward, the protagonist asked with interest, was there magic there too? He felt its vibrations, but it wasn't as plentiful as in the forest. If he could increase his level, he'd be safer than he was now. He really wanted to believe it. Back then, he hadn't even imagined that his life would change forever. Moving further, he spotted a large rat. The protagonist decided that fighting it head-on was dangerous. He queried his status and asked for information about his skill. Level 1 touch activated only upon contact with a living creature, and it drained its life force. Sigmund thought, "I see. I need to test this." He approached the rat and touched it, invoking touch. His hand passed right through the enemy's body and the rat fell dead. MC was amazed. The skill was powerful. Suddenly, the rat's body dissolved, revealing a magic stone in its place, much to the MC's surprise. He touched it and was amazed to find something flowing into him. A system window activated, informing him that he had leveled up to a second-tier ghost and now had unlocked a new skill derived from the magic stone. His unique skill was now touch, and his skill was enhanced sense of smell. From the information he'd requested, MC learned that touch was a unique skill that allowed him to acquire skills from demon stones. In other words, in addition to defeating monsters, to level up, he also needed to collect magic stones and gain skills. He was a ghost, a demon at the very bottom of the food chain. He never knew when or where he might accidentally die, so he had to constantly defeat enemies and build up his strength. He came across another large rat gnawing on someone's skull. The protagonist destroyed it and received another magic stone, which helped him gain a new skill, resistance to diseases and poisons. At that moment, another rat attacked him from behind. Sigmund cried out in surprise. The enemy flew through him and hit the wall. It dawned on the protagonist, oh yeah, Physical attacks don't work against ghosts. This is simply wonderful. MC activated touch and received another magic stone. He activated the system window, but was disappointed to realize that no new skills had appeared. It seemed he had nothing more to gain from the rats. Before he could catch his breath, a huge, terrifying caterpillar appeared before him. The protagonist thought in fear, another demon? How big it was. Then he remembered that physical attacks weren't a problem for him. He simply used touch, and that was it. When the protagonist did this, the caterpillar's magic stone granted him the skill of generating poison and resistance to poison. MC noted that it seemed poison didn't matter to him anymore. His next opponent was a huge spider. By defeating it, the protagonist gained the skill Omnivorous. He said that he was fairly harmless now, but he needed to level up. Sigmund moved on and saw several underground passages. He groaned sadly. The paths here were so convoluted that he was getting lost. In role-playing games, such places are called labyrinths. Suddenly, he came across a staircase leading downwards. The protagonist, surprised, said, maybe it really is a labyrinth. If so, he should check his status before moving on. He was now level 10 and could evolve. His touch skill had reached level 2. He also had access to enhanced smell, poison generation, disease and poison resistance, simple resistance, and omnivorousness. His unique skill was touch. The name was a soul from another world, a unique species of the named monster. His surprise knew no bounds. He was level 10, and he could evolve. He queried the evolution options, and the system gave him a zombie racial skill with a rotting body and resistance to pain, a high-ranking ghost racial skill with a deadly spirit, and a demon racial skill with the winter method. There was also another option, a skeletal demon with a bony body, capable of learning martial arts, and a racial skill with bone regeneration. After some thought, the protagonist chose one of the options. The system warned him that evolution had begun. His ghostly body glowed with a bright light. He had evolved into a high-ranking ghost. After examining himself, the protagonist concluded that he was no different from his former self, but his characteristics were already different. He now belonged to the high-ranking ghost race, possessed a second-level touch skill, second-level dark magic, enhanced sense of smell, poison generation, resistance to diseases, poisons, and resistance to poisons, and was omnivorous. His unique skill and name remained the same. The protagonist exclaimed in delight. He had dark magic. Magic was the best part of this world. He now felt himself overflowing with power. MC was now ready to descend the stairs. Having done so, Sigmund noted that the scenery wasn't much different. A bat flew toward him. The protagonist decided to start with a touch. He reached out to the monster, but the bat activated its magical defense and struck him in the arm. The protagonist grabbed his wounded arm and cried out in bewilderment to his opponent. It hurt! He dared to attack him? He would finish him off now. MC activated his magical power and strangled the opponent. Afterward, he thought, that was strange. His wound healed, and the system informed him that he had learned a new skill, wind magic. The protagonist was surprised by this skill. It seemed a magical attack could damage ghostly monsters like him, and the life force he received from touching them healed his wounds. Well, he'd have to be more careful in the future. Moving on, the protagonist was surprised to see another spirit. He looked at it closely and noted how detailed its face was. Apparently, this was normal for this world. It simply wandered back and forth, just like in the game. Sigmund sensed no will in it at all, just like in any other monster for that matter. MC activated wind magic and summoned a wind cutter against his opponent. The demon was instantly defeated, dissolving and dropping a magic stone. The protagonist was very surprised. He managed to defeat it with one blow. That's what would have happened to him if he'd been attacked by magic too. He needed to level up immediately. After that, he began leveling up relentlessly, moving ever deeper down, fighting the demons he encountered. Finally, the system informed him that his new opponent, a light clot, was level 3. The protagonist effortlessly attacked the opponent with his magical power and decided it seemed like a small thing, but he'd have to keep an eye on the new demons. The system informed him that he'd acquired a new skill, light magic, and it was quite easy. When the meaning of the new skill dawned on him, he exclaimed in bewilderment and confusion, "Wow, is this even legal? Can ghosts use light magic?" He needed to try this immediately. When the protagonist did so, activating light magic, he realized it dealt minor damage, but he thought he could handle it. After some time, having defeated several more demons, MC realized the new skill was very useful against undead like himself. Sigmund reached level 9, and evolution became available to him again. The protagonist exclaimed, "Excellent." He inquired about his options. He had the Holy Spirit, a special race of mortal demons with resistance to the light magic of their sacred attribute. Their racial skill included light magic, dark magic, and water magic. Another option was the skeleton monk, a demon with a body made of bones. It could learn martial arts, and its racial skill included bone regeneration, bone strengthening, and light resistance. A light zombie was also available, possessing a rotting body. Its racial skill included regeneration, pain resistance, and light resistance. The protagonist mused, wondering if something had changed in his evolutionary path since his last evolution, or did everything change slightly depending on the skills learned. Thanks to the light magic he had learned, he seemed to have gained light resistance. After some consideration, Sigmund chose the skeleton monk. After the transformation, the protagonist exclaimed in surprise. He had a body, albeit a skeletal one. He could stand on the ground. He wanted to check his status. He was pleased with the stats. It was already quite a long list. He said, martial arts skills acquired from the goblins. With a skeleton body, he could continue to level up. Now a level 1 skeleton monk, he had access to the following skills. Level 1 sword mastery, level 1 dagger mastery, body mastery, stick and shield mastery, level 1 archery, and level 3 touch. This list also included level 3 dark and wind magic, level 4 light magic, enhanced sense of smell, enhanced hearing and physical strength, strengthened bones, and increased vitality. In addition, he had poison creation, bone regeneration, disease and poison resistance, poison and light resistance, physical resilience, omnivorousness, and night vision. His unique skill was touch. The name remained the same. After some time, after several battles with various demons, the protagonist thought his leveling up seemed to be going much faster. He was having fun. Come to think of it, he used to enjoy games where you had to constantly level up. He then realized he was already past level 100. Perhaps he'd gotten too carried away. His appearance had changed dramatically. Having acquired a physical body, the protagonist realized there was simply no limit to leveling up. He now belonged to the Lord of Ereboloth, level 1 race. His name had also changed. He was now a man who had embarked on the path of evolution, having overcome everything. Thanks to this, all level and status restrictions were lifted. He said, "The only thing left to do in this dungeon is to go through such an ornate door." Before his eyes was a beautifully decorated door with an intricate pattern. Moreover, the protagonist felt hungry. When MC opened the door, he was greeted by the dungeon boss, a black dragon. Sigmund exclaimed, "Powerful!" Without hesitation, he rushed toward the demon, preparing to attack it head-on. The dragon unleashed its black, deadly flames. MC cried out from the impact, thinking, this is the dragon's power. It can even pierce his own defenses. But he has the skill, super speed regeneration. Activating this skill, Sigmund slashed his weapon at the dragon's leg and immediately realized he was in for a rough ride. If he didn't take the fight seriously, he might die. The enemy took a deep breath and unleashed his deadly flames again. The protagonist, using high-speed flight and gravity magic, soared upward, evading the demon's attack and struck him in the torso from above. The dragon roared, and the protagonist exclaimed joyfully, "It worked." But at that moment, the enemy belched its flames again, which MC couldn't dodge. He fell, only to see the demon's enormous paw raised above him. He simply didn't have time to react, and the dragon's limb crushed him to the floor. The enemy, thinking that he had finished with him, removed his paw and was about to leave. The protagonist, using regeneration, called out to him, and in a disgruntled tone told the dragon that he had ruined all his clothes. His attire was indeed simply torn to shreds. MC accelerated, rushed at the enemy at the speed of sound, and sank his teeth into his neck, activating his blood-draining skill. As he did so, the protagonist wiped his mouth and said, "Lord Ereboloth is the final evolution of Ereboloth, a type of vampire. In other words, the final evolution of the immortal type. Even in battle against a dragon, he's not so easy to kill." He rushed at the enemy and finished him off with ease. The dragon's body dissolved. The protagonist sat down to rest and muttered, "Finally he's won." He couldn't even begin to estimate how many hours the battle had lasted. After the enemy's body vanished, a chest appeared, and the system notified the protagonist that he'd received the items dropped by the dungeon boss, the Black Dragon. Sigmund peered inside with interest, and saw a chest full of gold and silver coins, with a sword resting on top. He carefully picked up the weapon and said, "He's received various items before, but these seem to be of the highest quality. You can't get something like this anywhere else." The protagonist activated his evaluation points and realized he was holding Ascalon, the dragon-slaying sword. The protagonist wondered in confusion why he couldn't have gotten it before he won. There was nothing else for him to do here, so MC summoned a teleporter. When he appeared in a certain place, his surprise knew no bounds. It was the very same forest where he first woke up. MC laughed and said, "Looking at it now, it doesn't seem as magical as the lower floors of the dungeon." Suddenly, he felt incredibly weak and fell to his knees. Was he really that tired? He also couldn't believe it. He'd been hiding in the dungeon ever since he'd arrived in another world. How many years had he wasted? He rose to his feet and exclaimed excitedly, "No! It had all been worth it." He'd evolved, and now he had a body. The protagonist looked at the dungeon entrance and thought it would be a good idea to seal it off. At that moment, he received a notification from the system that he'd received a new designation. The protagonist activated his status and carefully reviewed it. He was now a lord. His skills included 10th level swordsmanship and dark magic, daggercraft, stickcraft, archery, touch, earth, lightning, and water magic, 8th level enhancement magic, shieldcraft, wind magic, light magic, and 9th level fire magic. He also had bodycraft, 7th level spacetime magic, throwing, luck magic, and 4th level alchemy. He also had access to smell, hearing enhancement, physical strength enhancement, bone strengthening, vitality enhancement, poison creation, bone regeneration, disease and poison resistance, light resistance, physical resilience, and omnivorousness. Additionally, he had night vision, intuition, cruelty, durability, intimidation, stealth movement, leap, accumulation, high-speed flight, vampire bite, atomization, alteration, poison claw, and dragon spore roar. He was also granted the unique skill of touch. The name had also changed. Now he was a soul from another world, a unique species of the name monster, embarking on the path of evolution and the conqueror of the Abyssal Labyrinth. Sigmund exclaimed in surprise, "Wow, the Abyssal Labyrinth, that was the name of the dungeon. So what should he do now?" Contemplating his situation, he remembered there were many monsters weaker than him in the forest. It was best not to disturb them. Therefore, the protagonist used the skill of stealth. Wandering through the forest, he considered leaving it for now. Although, no need, he was a vampire. If he encountered a human, he would most likely be defeated. He had fought in the dungeon for too long. He needed to rest. Perhaps he should settle in the forest? He was a demon who had originally appeared in this forest, so he could handle it. His home was his fortress, right? Since that's the case, it's time to explore the surroundings. Forgetting about rest, the protagonist activated the acceleration and set off to explore. Taking to the air, he looked around. MC exclaimed in delight. There were no words to describe how beautiful it was. He could choose any spot for his base. He spotted a river and decided to head there. Approaching the spot, MC noted how clear the water was. He tasted it and wondered why it tasted so good. Although, what comparison did he have? If you recall, in the dungeon, he only drank blood, and that was from demons. Even though he was a vampire, he couldn't feed on the blood of beautiful girls, could he? Sigmund looked into the water's surface and exclaimed in surprise, "Who was this handsome man?" He knew, of course, that his hair had turned silver, but he never thought he'd have such a face. He didn't remember looking like that before his transformation. After some thought, the protagonist gave up. He was going to live in the forest, so who cares if his face was good or bad? But he thought vampires couldn't reflect in mirrors, or had problems with the sun, or something. Thanks to his photosensitivity, he was perfectly fine. Okay, time to build himself a home. A quick glance at the magic flow showed him that the area around the former dungeon was teeming with magic, while south of the river it was less so. There were also gaps in the forest. To avoid disasters, it was better to settle above the river. But he was in another world, so if he wanted to rest and retire, it would be better to be south of the river, where the magic was weaker. The protagonist roughly chose a spot for himself, and, using dark magic, cleared the area where the future structure would stand. He decided it would definitely be faster this way. Afterwards, Sigmund surveyed his work with satisfaction and said he hadn't expected such a good result. About 500 square meters, more is better than less. Now that he'd cleared the area, he needed to get back to work and draw up a base plan. Drawing on the ground, MC planned the house to be located in the center, the surrounding land to be a field with a canal running from the river. He'd make the house itself Western style, since we're talking about vampires. Sigmund rolled up his sleeves and began laying the foundation using gravity magic. After inspecting the work, the protagonist reasoned that if left as is, the house would sink. He needed to strengthen it with earth magic. Having done this, he spoke, and with that, he was done. Next on the plan, woodworking. The protagonist activated his dark magic skill and summoned hands from the shadows. His reasoning was correct. Freshly cut wood contains water within itself. If left like this, the wood would change shape as it dries. Drying usually takes time, but could he use water magic to get rid of the moisture? Okay, he needs to dry it like this. He also needs to think about a wall to enclose the canal and the property. It would be cool to build it from a pile of stones. The stones can be shaped with earth magic, and then he can lay the finished product out as a wall. He also needs to think about a water canal. In the end, the protagonist couldn't tell how many days and nights had passed since the start of construction. But finally, the house was built. It was a fully adapted dwelling with a modern twist. It was the kind of house he'd always dreamed of. Of course, it was equipped with the necessary bathrooms, although he didn't intend to use them often. But the stove, air conditioning, and lighting were installed using a combination of alchemy and grant magic. As a former Japanese, he couldn't afford to sacrifice comfort, although the inside was still empty. He'd have to make furniture too, but he had plenty of time, so he'd make it himself. Stretching sweetly, warming up his body, the protagonist said, he can just tell it's going to be fun. After some time, in his first year, he unlocked a new skill, wood carving. In his third year, he unlocked leatherworking, and in his 10th year, metal carving. In his 20th year, in the forest, he mastered blacksmithing. The protagonist looked at the blade and said, the entire forge was built just for making this knife. Suddenly, MC thought, he just wanted to relax and not think about anything. Why does he work every day, improving his skills? He's not even a craftsman. There are so many other things to do. Ultimately, Sigmund decided to take a break from crafting and take up gardening, but that requires diligence too. A few days later, the protagonist, after washing the dishes, became wary. He sensed a human presence, but no hostility was detected. He heard a male voice from the yard, saying that if the owners were here, he would apologize to them for wandering in without permission. The protagonist opened the door and asked who was there. A surprised Sebel and Lifa stood before them. The girl suddenly began to lose consciousness, and MC cried out in fear, "Is she okay?" The old man sank to the ground after her. Sigmund realized his magic was leaking. Were they really that sensitive to it? He was terribly sorry that this had happened. He picked up the uninvited guests and carried them to the guest room. Looking at the girl, he realized he couldn't touch her with his hands, so he had to activate light magic and invoke purification. After laying the guests down on the bed, the protagonist went downstairs, brewed tea from the leaves he found in the forest, and slowly savored the wonderful taste of the drink. After a while, Sybil appeared in his field of vision. The protagonist sympathetically asked him if he was okay. The old man apologized for the inconvenience. Sigmund retorted, "No problem," and offered his guest some tea. Sybil didn't refuse his offer and sat down next to MC. After sampling the drink, the man praised its wonderful aroma and taste. The protagonist replied that it was nice to hear such flattering praise. Sybil asked him if he was alone. The man told him his name and added that he lived on the northern edge of the abyss. The protagonist noted, so they were neighbors. He responded by telling the old man his name and saying that he had taken it upon himself to clear the land and build a house here. Was there anything wrong with that? Sybil replied that no, the forest didn't belong to anyone, so no one would complain. He looked closely at Sigmund and asked him point blank, "He's a vampire, right?" The protagonist didn't deny it. Yes, he was a vampire of sorts. He cursed silently. He knew it. For God's sake, couldn't they just part ways peacefully? He added. But he's also light-colored, so he doesn't need to drink blood, and the sun doesn't bother him, just like silver. For example, he uses silver utensils. Sybil was surprised. Really? At that moment, Lifa called out to her grandfather and asked him if he was awake. The man assured his granddaughter that everything was fine. The protagonist told them that it seemed his power had stunned them. He apologized for that and would now make tea for Lifa as well. At that moment, Sybil fell to his knees before MC and asked him to take him and his granddaughter into his care. Sigmund didn't expect such a turn of events. He confusedly asked him to calm down and explain everything. What did into his care mean? The man explained that into his care is a magical contract. A servant swears absolute loyalty to their master and cannot disobey his orders. In this case, they swear allegiance to him, the protagonist. The protagonist remarked, perplexed. It sounded rather rude. The old man said, but there's an advantage to that. Like him, demons can also evolve. But unlike monsters, they have a very rare chance to do so by becoming servants of a supreme master. MC objected, embarrassed. Is he a demon? No, he's undead. He simply evolved many times. The granddaughter and grandfather exchanged surprised glances, and Lifa, astonished, told him, he must be joking. Demons and undead are two different species. Skeletons and zombies can't become ghouls or vampires. Sigmund giggled stupidly and said, so that's it. Actually, he turned into all of them. Sybil told his granddaughter, MC must have been joking. The girl sheepishly apologized to the protagonist. He told her there was nothing to apologize for and suggested they return to the question of why him. They'd only just met, and the world was full of vampires, weren't they? The old man retorted, he's a high-ranking vampire, right? The protagonist confirmed that he was. Sybil continued, there were a few lower-ranking vampires in their demon kingdom, but a lord was rare. Even in a demon's long lifespan, vampire lords were the highest of the high, so it was obvious why they ignored them. Because of their tendency to follow the strong, they wanted to become his servants and help him gain influence in the demon kingdom. Sigmund was surprised by their expression. He wondered if such a kingdom existed. So that was how things were. It didn't seem like they had any ill intentions. He would even be glad to have those who knew about the outside world around him. He told them out loud that they would plow the fields with him, or hunt in the forest, or gather materials, or build something. He's been a hermit for 20 years and doesn't want to suddenly become a lord. The old man replied that he doesn't mind. MC asked Lifa, what about her? The girl said that if her grandfather says so, then she's all for it too. Sigmund agreed. Okay, then let them tell him how. After some time, they began to negotiate. The protagonist stood in front of Sybil, enveloped him in magic, and connected their magical currents. The old man suddenly turned pale, coughed, and said, this is more than he imagined. The protagonist anxiously asked him if everything was all right. The man assured him that he was fine. After a while, he excitedly told the protagonist that he was now his servant, and full of magical power, as if he had become young again. The protagonist said, well, that's good. Next up is Lifa. The girl told him she looks forward to working with him. MC thought, looking at her, now he needs to do the same. Lifa, while they were making the pact, suddenly moaned so languidly that the protagonist confusedly wondered, why is she doing this? Make her stop. This is too exciting. Finally, they finished. The girl looked at her hands in amazement and said, it feels like this body isn't hers. Sigmund muttered, well, that's great. Sybil told his granddaughter that he was right after all. She replied, yes, that's true. Now she can definitely defeat her father. Grandfather said, not just defeat him, but also return everything he took. The protagonist wondered, what are they even talking about? Sybil called out to the protagonist, bowed respectfully, and said that he, a demon from the ISEKAI'D clan, would henceforth serve as his butler. Lifa also swore an oath of allegiance to MC, adding that she would serve him as a servant. The protagonist responded with confusion, pleased to meet them. He never would have thought he'd have a butler and a maid. Was he starting a new life with demons as his servants? After a while, Sybil asked his master in surprise, isn't that a crawler devil thread moth? The protagonist answered him, yes, that's right. He wanted to process them into thread using alchemy. He seemed to have met this devil on level 30. The butler was surprised. He even uses alchemy, so this backpack isn't quite ordinary? The protagonist replied, yes, it is magical. When he created it, he imbued it with space-time magic and luck magic, and now it can store anything. However, he can use dark magic with the Shadow Vault, so that's impractical. Sybil noted with bewilderment. Even space-time magic, well, what their master doesn't have. Dark magic can only be used by mortal demons. MC thought, Demons and demon-like creatures are different. Lifa asked the protagonist if he also makes furniture from threads. The protagonist replied that that would be great, but alchemy can't process them into fabric. The girl enthusiastically asked him to leave it to her. He learned that Lifa and Sybil of the Arkini clan are spider demons. Yes, no one can handle threads better than them. He asked her if he could then leave the processing of fabrics to her. The girl assured him that it was a great honor for her to work with such threads. They are a national treasure, even in the demon kingdom. MC was surprised. A national treasure? He answered out loud. Lifa, he still has plenty of them. The materials in the forest are usually of good quality. So even without fabric, you can still live here, right? Lifa told him, it's very cozy here. Especially the bathrooms, it's simply amazing. She would like to live here for the rest of her life. The protagonist laughed and told her he was very pleased to hear that, but she was young and beautiful. She wanted to become independent or get married, didn't she? Sable and his granddaughter stared at him in confusion. The protagonist, embarrassed, hastened to reassure them, lest they think anything bad. The old man told him that he and his granddaughter were now living with him and would serve him for the rest of their lives. Lifa was now his servant and concubine. The MC was confused. Why was he talking about his granddaughter like that? He was joking, right? This is called harassment. Did he understand that? Sable, confused, told him, as their master would say. The protagonist countered, no, that's not it. He has skills like enhanced energy, so such jokes are forbidden. The old man assured him that he understood everything. He added, sincerely, that he wanted to serve him for the rest of his life. His abilities had increased since becoming his master's servant. The only concern was his lifespan. Lifa added that compared to his immortality, their kind was like a candle. The protagonist thought, I see. So he'd have to say goodbye to those he'd become friends with. He said, lifespan is a bit sad, but there's still hope. It's evolution. Sable told him they were no longer just Arkeni and were directly dependent on his condition. If they evolved, while they wouldn't become immortal, they could acquire skills related to longevity. Lifa noted with a smile that if they succeeded, they would be together forever. The protagonist had much to think about. After some time, he told them that if they wanted to evolve, they needed to level up. The middle part of the forest was a good place for high-level demons. The old man objected to his master, saying, this is the forest of the abyss. Even the previous overlord, the most skilled warrior in the kingdom, encountered powerful demons as soon as he entered the forest from the north and retreated. The protagonist looked at him in bewilderment, then laughed, saying, what a joke. The demons in the center of the forest were below the 40th floor of the labyrinth. Why would he retreat? Sybil looked at him in amazement and asked, he knows about the dungeon here. He even said he'd been there. Sigmund pointed out that if he was referring to the abyssal dungeon, he'd already conquered it, so he wasn't there now. Sybil's mind seemed to be spinning with bewilderment and amazement. The protagonist continued, well, if they're so worried, he can make equipment for them. Lifa asked him, confused, is he serious? He answered, he's always wanted to make equipment for someone other than himself. The protagonist asked them what weapons they wielded. Sybil answered, wielding a slender one-handed sword. The girl said she used 2 small daggers. MC considered briefly, then activated dark magic in the shadow vault. He retrieved the fangs and claws of a black dragon from the vault and suggested his allies forge a sword. The servants wanted to say something, but he would also use thread. First he would ask Leaf to weave the thread. Then they would consult and make a decision. He would use alchemy to process it and enhance everything with magic. The equipment would have defensive strength to withstand battle. He would craft the boots using the leatherworking skill. As for the weapons, he would synthesize the black dragon claws and a small amount of adamantite using alchemy. Then, he would heat the resulting material in a furnace and forge it into a sword using the blacksmithing skill. Using his own algorithm, he accomplished everything as planned. Thus, he strengthened and improved Sybil's slender sword. And for Lifa's daggers, he uses black dragon fangs and mithril. After some time, when everything was ready, both equipment and weapons, the protagonist suggested they conduct a final test in a real fight. They would head into the middle of the forest and kill demons, while also gathering meat and medicinal herbs. He expressed hope that they would find edible fruit there. Sybil exclaimed triumphantly he would protect the master even at the cost of his own life. The protagonist countered, no, he would fight first, and the two of them would finish off the opponents. The old man was upset. He had so wanted to protect him. Lifa interrupted her grandfather and told MC not to worry, she would protect him. The protagonist chuckled, wondering if it was in their blood or something. They set out, and Sigmund activated his stealth skill. When they arrived, they immediately encountered a demon. The protagonist attacked it first, then shouted to his allies that they would do it all together now. Lifa swung her daggers fiercely and struck the enemy. Following her, Sable attacked the demon with his renewed sword. The giant locust was finished. The protagonist thought, well done, his allies knew how to fight, while he relied on skill and level, especially Sable's footwork, soft and powerful, with a minimum of steps. Such combat skill is acquired through rigorous training. He should emulate him. They successfully fought the next opponents as well. After some time, MC told them they had leveled up quite well. Now they had plenty of meat and magic stones. Suddenly, a strange sound was heard. The allies became wary, and the old man asked, what's there? A huge magical bear suddenly appeared from behind the trees. Lifa cried out in fear. It can't be. She shouted at Sigmund to run away. The demon stood before the girl in his full, enormous form, and she froze for a moment in horror. The protagonist, arriving just in time, activated dark magic and shadow tentacles that entangled the enemy, focusing on his neck. Lifa stared in surprise. The protagonist had told her his neck was his weak point. Sigmund shouted, "They need to attack him," and he charged first, cutting off the enemy's head. Suddenly, the old man glowed with a bright light, and spider legs appeared in place of his legs. The system voice announced that he had attained the highest form of Arcane Servant. Sigmund exclaimed in surprise, "He's evolved!" It seemed he had already surpassed the level cap. Lifa rejoiced for her grandfather. The man continued, considering his appearance, most likely his devotion to his master and his desire to be a butler had merged. The protagonist thought, "I see." It made my heart sad somehow. The butler returned to his original form and said he'd gained the skill of longevity from serving as a servant to his master, Sigmund. Level 100 is the upper limit for most demon lords. Even the previous lord was level 90, and the current one is level 60. So the protagonist is right. There's plenty of experience to be gained in this forest. Soon, Lifa also evolved. The system reported that she had attained the highest form of Mistress Arcania. The girl joyfully turned to the protagonist and exclaimed, "She did it too." MC replied, "That's very good," but he was confused by the word mistress. "What do you mean, wife? What's going on in his head?" Sigmund told his allies that since they'd evolved so quickly, they should return home. It seemed the equipment their master had given them was in good condition. The protagonist replied, "Well, the increase in ability level from evolution should be enough for a leisurely stroll around the house. By the way, is the demon kingdom close to here?" Sigmund said yes, it could be reached in 4 days. 3 days from here, there was another town belonging to the human kingdom. The protagonist said 3 days to the town, then they could go shopping. They probably sold spices and other things there. The only problem was payment. The old man noted that he checked his assets, and they were equivalent to a high-ranking nobleman in the demon kingdom. MC was surprised, so the money wouldn't run out for a while, right? Then he'd like to buy things without worrying about funds. For that, he needed them to be able to walk through the forest on their own. Lifa exclaimed, "Let him entrust this to her. She'll do everything in her power." The allies returned home. Late that night, as he went to bed, the protagonist thought, he still doesn't feel like he's living with anyone. He's been in the dungeon too long. Suddenly, his peace was disturbed by Lifa, who quietly entered his room in a revealing outfit and addressed her master tenderly. The MC exclaimed in confusion, "What is she doing here?" The girl, confused by his reaction, replied that she had come to keep her master company. He immediately hid under the covers and she asked him, perplexed, "What's the matter?" From under the covers, the protagonist told her to take care of herself. She should go to her room. "Good night, and all the best." Lifa, confused, said, "Okay," and left. Meanwhile, in the Demon Kingdom, in the meeting room of the Demon Lord's palace, Vandert, the kingdom's lord, asked the military officer Iglis how things were going. The officer replied, "Yes, lord, trade with other countries, except the Holy Land, is going well. They're dealing with the wars unleashed by the previous overlord, improving relations with neighboring countries, and restoring national strength." Vandert asked him if the Holy Land was still a problem. What was his opinion on the matter? Iglis answered as usual. The Holy Kingdom had decided that demons and monsters were evil creatures to be exterminated in the name of God. However, few supported them. The overlord remarked in bewilderment, couldn't they possibly have at least a modicum of intelligence? But the fact remained. The last overlord had unleashed a war against everyone. Abaddon, a civil servant of the kingdom, remarked that they could greatly benefit from the assistance of Lord Sebel. The overlord inquired of him, a former vassal of the last demon lord. "He's retired now, correct? He's certainly a man of intelligence and character, and he was very grateful to the civil servant for his advice." Abaddon turned to him and added that they had signed armistice treaties with other countries and were finally able to advance. The next day, the protagonist, wiping sweat from his brow, declared, "A wonderful day." He'd never get tired, so he could work all day. Sebel and Lifa had gone into town for food, while he worked in the fields. He could afford it after all. Hadn't he spread his horizons too thin? Opportunities abounded, allowing him to grow his own wheat, grapes, or anything else that could be used to make alcohol. He'd learned that the only alcoholic beverages in the world were cheap ale and hard-to-find elite wines. If they wanted good, affordable alcohol, they'd be better off making it themselves. But it was hard to manage alone. A monster like him also had trouble hiring people. He remembered reading something about automatons in Sebel's book. He'd have to look that up later. First, he needed to try and find some grapes in the forest before those two returned. He'd seen a couple of fruits somewhere, similar to peaches and apples, so it was worth looking for them. But first, he needed to secure the house. The protagonist activated fog, shrouding the house in a magical shroud. Afterward, he went in search of berries and fruit. An unfamiliar berry caught his attention. He tried it and remarked, it tasted pretty good too. He gathered some and stored them in the shadow vault. Now he had to start creating automatons. Arriving home, he shouted to his allies that he had returned. Lifa and Sebel greeted their master. The girl added that she would now prepare tea for him. When everything was ready, Sebel informed him that they had managed to obtain several books on magical grimoires and ingredients, such as barley, wheat, turnips, clover seeds, and other magical grimoires for alchemy. Lifa added, they also took some vegetable seedlings, essentials, spices, and alcohol. The protagonist thanked them for their help. After a while, the butler asked him if he was building something new. Sigmund replied that he was, indeed, building automatons for the home and golems for the farm. It was a good idea, and both would last a long time in the local forest, where magic was very strong. He read that it was created by infusing magical power into materials like earth and stone, using the earth magic command to create a golem. The resulting golem core acts like a heart, and when destroyed, it returns to its original form. The protagonist mused that golems in dungeons could function constantly because they drew magical power from the dungeon itself, but they only lasted for the amount of magical power they were initially given. Well, trial and error might be worth trying. He suggested that his allies create their own alcohol. So, while crafting sake brewing tools, he simultaneously began making a golem. The protagonist told Sebel he wanted to use wood for an agricultural golem. What kind of wood did he think would be best? The old man replied that the deeper the magic, the stronger the wood. The deepest magic was in the forest, where the abyssal dungeon used to be. The protagonist exclaimed, so they must use wood from that place. Sebel noted that only he alone could easily get there. After some time, Sigmund appeared with enormous logs and said he had collected them all in one go. Beginning to work on the wood, MC decided on spherical joints, approximately 2 meters high, given diligent work. Magic stones are crafted and objects are inserted into them, each with its own function. The golem must sense magic, sound, and heat, and it must also contain a magic battery. A few hours later, examining the created golem, he exclaimed, "It looks good. Well, the test can begin." The protagonist activated the golem creation skill. Kuganochi activated and rose from his knees. The protagonist used his appraisal glasses and saw its stats. Kuganochi was a level 0 wooden golem, with skills including level 1 body development, regeneration, stubbornness, monstrous strength, and the perception of heat, sound, and magic. He was the servant of the Immortal King. Sigmund remarked in surprise, "Body development? Not bad, right?" Sebel exclaimed admiringly, "What a beautiful golem." The protagonist asked the old man if golems could evolve. The butler replied that he thought it was possible if the master gave it a name. The protagonist thought, I see, naming usually requires expending magical power. He had researched the matter. Sebel noted that assigning a name expended a large amount of magical power, but for a master, such a thing was a mere trifle. MC was surprised, really? He'd been able to name himself as a ghost, so perhaps this wouldn't be a problem. MC looked at the golem and said, okay, from now on, his name is Kuganochi. Now his stats had a name. Sigmund shook the golem's hand and told him he was counting on him. The golem exhaled in gratitude and joy at meeting him. The protagonist thought he had this feeling that his life was becoming more and more fulfilling. After some time, the protagonist asked Sebel if he could go with Kuganochi and raise his level. His level had recently increased significantly. The butler replied, no problem. If he stays nearby, he can also become stronger. MC said he'll work on the others for now. He'd already decided that his next automaton would be designed to do housework and clean the inside of the mansion. However, the inside of the house is kept clean magically, so their primary task is to assist Lifa. So he'll make them so they'll feel out of place around her. Then the servants' structure should be closer to human, to match Lifa's. He activated the magical steel and spoke. He himself had previously been a skeleton, so he was confident in the bone structure. The protagonist took a demon bone, its tendons, and decided to try making muscles as well. He wondered if he could process them with alchemy. After making the head and face, the protagonist hesitated. It didn't look quite right. Perhaps he could make the mouth move. Meanwhile, in the demon kingdom, Vandert asked Abaddon in confusion, Lord Sebel has disappeared? The official answered, yes. He sent his men to the shelter, but there was no one there. The Lord remarked with surprise, something wrong? Iglis said the northern outer ring, while relatively safe, was located on the edge of the abyss. Searching there is difficult. Vandert said that all demon tribes are drawn to power, but Sebel had always been rational. He was one of those to whom even the former Lord, the most powerful among them, could turn for advice. Subjugation to power is one of the demon's problems. But even without it, Sebel had taken good care of him, as instructed by his father. Is there any way to find out what's wrong with him? If everything is alright? At that moment, Abaddon's assistant ran into the hall, apologizing for interrupting their meeting. The official asked him what had happened. The assistant told him they had received a message that the Lord had been seen in the city. Sometime later, when the butler and the golem returned home, the protagonist said that it seemed he had successfully raised his level. Well then, they would continue evolving. Sigmund thought that a golem was a creature that followed orders, so it couldn't evolve without its master's command. I wonder if it was because of his influence that it had a certain charm? Kuganochi raised his hands and shouted, come on! The protagonist queried his status. He was now a tall, level 1 wood golem. His skills included level 4 enhancement magic, level 2 plant magic, physical resistance, fire resistance, regeneration, durability, and monstrous strength. MC exclaimed, fire resistance. Good work. He thanked Lifa and her grandfather for their help. The girl replied that they had done what they were supposed to, and it was useful for them too. She asked him how the work on the automatons was going. The protagonist said, not very smoothly. He would like to know her opinion, since they would be working with her. He was thinking of making a maid. What kind of girl would she like to have at her side? Lifa said she wants a beautiful girl. The protagonist stared at her in surprise. The girl corrected herself. Since she is a doll, she should look like a cute girl. MC remarked. Okay, then let her help him with the design. The girl happily agreed to help him. After a short while, they began discussing it. MC told Lifa he wanted to make the doll's skin and hair in case it evolved. The girl replied that she would make the hair. Sigmund then said, then they need to decide on a material for the skin. If they want a natural texture, how about synthesizing a skin membrane as a base? Lifa agreed. Not a bad idea. The protagonist continued. He needs something durable and high quality, so he'll use a black dragon wing membrane. The girl said, as the master says. Then, it would be better to use materials from a reptilian demon. The protagonist agreed with her. The closer the materials, the better they would combine during synthesis. He was amazed at her level of knowledge. Lifa smiled sheepishly and said, no, she's just trying to help. MC thought with a smile that she was very cute. He applied the gloss of lizard skin and snake skin, activated his alchemy skill, and set to work. He created black and white leather. He was surprised to note that the black one seemed to have the stealth skill, while the white one had regeneration. He still couldn't decide which one was best. Sybil asked him why he didn't make 2 maids. The protagonist exclaimed, exactly. There was no need to limit himself if he had the materials and time. The butler agreed. Yes, considering the size of the house, it sounded like a good solution. And while the craftsman worked on them, the golem's level was steadily increasing. MC thanked the old man again and added, but actually, there's something strange about Kugunochi. After a while, the golem began repeating its favorite word more often. Sigmund asked it in confusion. What's wrong? What's wrong? Has it already reached a new level of evolution? The golem tried to communicate with gestures. The protagonist didn't understand. Does it want something? Kugunochi made a sound of agreement. The protagonist activated the Shadow Vault skill and muttered, let's see. He took out a magic stone and asked the golem, does it want this? The golem held out its hands. It was a mithril ingot. When Kugunochi used it, the system reported that he was now a level 1 high-class golem. The protagonist noticed it was no longer wooden, but there was something else. The butler told him the golem simply wanted to be useful. Sigmund noted with admiration how it grew smarter with each level. Lifa said, it looks like the golem can move around the mansion on its own. She should also become stronger. Is this a demonic instinct? After this, MC devoted himself to creating automatons for a while. He worked tirelessly. He used red gems for the eyes and asked Lifa to sew outfits for the maids. After some time, the protagonist exclaimed, now everything is ready. The allies faced identical dolls, differing only in skin color and clothing. The protagonist activated them, and the dolls came to life. The protagonist named the dark-skinned golem Blank, and the white-skinned one Noir. The dolls repeated their names and said they were pleased to meet their master. The MC asked for their stats. Noir and Blanc were of the living doll race. They possessed the skills of level 2 cooking, level 2 housework, physical resistance, magic resistance, enhanced agility, and enhanced physical strength. Noir had stealth, and Blanc had regeneration. Both held the title of handmaidens of the Immortal King. When the protagonist realized the dolls had responded, his glasses for evaluation fell off in surprise. He exclaimed in amazement, they're talking? Is that even possible? Sybil noted that he wouldn't have said it, but he thought they were able to speak thanks to his power. Lifa exclaimed in surprise, so that's their master. She hugged the dolls and joyfully announced that they would both work for her now. She couldn't wait to see them in action. And so, the protagonist had a wonderful addition to his ranks. After some time, the protagonist began to ponder the Abyssal Forest, a deep forest teeming with evil demons, rumored to contain a dangerous dungeon. In the center of this ominous forest stands a lair, or rather, a home. Day by day, life is becoming more and more vibrant. Lifa teaches Blanc and Noir how to work and level up. The maid told him that fruit trees are growing well. They need better living conditions. At this time, the protagonist, while creating buildings, said that he would build a sewing hut for Lifa and a woodworking shed. The blacksmith's hut and warehouse were already built. He plans to build a brewery and a watermill for grinding, but he needs to improve the waterways. He'll build the foundation using earth magic. Sigmund asked Kugunochi to help him. The robot used its plant magic skill and began assisting its master. After some time, the annex was built. MC smiled, saying he was still amazed at its versatility. He reflected that plant magic is a very useful skill for both construction and cultivation. It's likely a unique ability for the former forest golem. Thanks to it, the harvest cycle was quicker, and the harvest itself is tastier. Fortunately, the forest has ample soil for cultivation. It supplies the magical power for the magic he uses, so Kugunochi doesn't have to strain himself too much. But perhaps he still needed help. After some time, he created another golem, which he named Tom. The protagonist reflected that, frankly, he had no imagination for names. The new golem was smaller. It possessed the skills of plant magic and woodworking, and was also good at detailed work. Kugunochi, Tom, and Sybil were assisting him, so construction was in full swing. The protagonist climbed onto the roof and began working, when he suddenly glanced at the surrounding countryside and noted with surprise he hadn't paid much attention because of his resistance skills. But what was the climate like here? Sybil replied that it was autumn now. When winter came, the temperature would drop and there would be some snow. This year would probably be the same. MC said he understood everything. They used magic and alchemy to maintain the temperature inside the house, but it was difficult to do the same outside. They also needed to make a few essentials for Sybil and Leaf. The butler replied that he would be grateful, but was he sure? Sigmund assured him it was okay, since with Tom and Kugunochi around, he didn't have to worry about construction and farming, so he could focus on other things. By this time, Leafa had approached them and said the fruit seemed to be ripe. MC tried a piece and said it was delicious. The local land was rich in magic. You could even taste it. Did she like it? The girl replied that of course she did. She'd never tasted such delicious fruit, especially peaches with their exquisite sweet and sour flavor. Could they grow more peach trees? The protagonist smiled and remarked, why not? He considered it. Honestly, he currently had plenty of vegetables, fruits, wheat, and demon meat in his storage, which he hunted to level up. But it was better to have some in reserve than none at all, and it wouldn't spoil in the shadow storage. A month later, they finished building the brewery. MC said that from now on, they would all be busy making wine. Let them pick grapes. After this, all the allies went grape picking. After some time, they collected many barrels of grapes. The protagonist said they would leave half of them with the skins on, and use the other half, removing the skins and seeds. They had a lot of work ahead of them. Sybil happily remarked that it would be worth it. Sigmund asked him with a smile if he was a drinker. The Lord explained that it was all due to a wine shortage in the past. He had previously been the Demon Lord's assistant, but despite his position, he was only given wine once a year. The protagonist smiled and remarked that he seemed serious. Then they would put all their efforts into it. He thought about how gravity magic sorted and crushed the grapes, removing any excess. The resulting juice was then fermented in barrels. The barrels and building were maintained at the optimal temperature and humidity using magic, thus ripening the grapes. After some time, they had completed all the work. The protagonist noted that all they had to do was wait for the finished product. Wait, he hadn't decided what to do with the bottles yet. They needed corks and glass to create the containers. Sybil told him that the neighboring towns didn't produce corks. Leafa guessed that it was grown in the territory of the Demon Kingdom's Prime Minister. That was Lord Demolus, wasn't it? MC asked if they could buy it. The girl replied, let him leave it to them. Maybe they should get the bottles too? He said no, they'd buy the glass, and he'd create the bottles himself. Leafa asked him if he wanted to do it himself. The protagonist replied that he wanted the bottle to match the finished wine, so a personal touch was needed. The girl remarked that she was then looking forward to the wine even more. He said that didn't mean it wouldn't be tasty. She expressed confidence that it would be excellent. The protagonist looked at Blanc and Noir and said that he seemed to remember them, having no sense of taste. They don't even need to eat, but maybe there's some way to give them a sense of taste? Leafa replied that there had been precedents in the centuries-long history of the Demon Kingdom. Perhaps, if they continued to evolve. Suddenly, both of the maids called out to Sigmund and asked him to level them up. MC wondered, perplexed. Were they jealous? Did they want this themselves? The protagonist, looking at the snow falling from the sky, thought that winter had arrived in the forest. The house was completely covered in snowflakes. The golems he had created earlier had taken over the work in the fields, so they decided to enjoy a break. Blanc informed him that his meal was ready. It was steak with vegetables, seasonings, and sauce. She added that she and her assistants had prepared this dish today. The protagonist replied with a smile, yes indeed. Well, he'd see how they did. He thought Leaf was better at cooking than he was. She had a talent for cooking. How sweet. MC wished him bon appetit and began eating. When he ate the first piece, his delight knew no bounds. He exclaimed, it's very delicious. Blanc and Noir were pleased with his assessment. He thought, well done. They'd managed to acquire a sense of taste. Now their food was more varied and delicious. Sigmund added, they did it. He looked at Sybil and Leaf. They were smiling happily. The protagonist invited them to sit down and eat together. Turning to the butler, he told him he was going to ask him about the forest's surroundings. He knew the location of the Demon Kingdom where they used to live. The old man noted that yes, it was northwest of here, through the forest and mountains, and directly west of them was the human country. The city where they went shopping belonged to it. The protagonist replied that he had figured out the northwest. Thank you. And what was to the southeast? Sybil said he only knew about the east from books. If he went east, he would pass through forests and grasslands, and beyond them, vast deserts and wild lands that ended at the sea. MC noted that the description sounded beautiful. Wasn't there a country there? The butler said nomads lived in the east, wandering from place to place, but the country wasn't powerful. The human kingdom is closely adjacent to the forest and the demon kingdom, so they are reluctant to expand eastward. However, the Holy Land of Zarad is a different matter entirely. The protagonist, perplexed, asked him about the Holy Land of Zarad. The old man explained that this country considers demons to be absolutely evil and therefore strives to destroy them with all its might. After the change of Demon Lord, the human kingdom signed a ceasefire with them, and only the Holy Land of Zarad is attempting to expand its territory by attacking the demons. It's important to note that the human kingdom has finally matched the demon kingdom in strength. Only Zarad still lags behind. Although the humans are mostly dissatisfied with the demons, They don't want the Holy Land to provide a pretext for renewed war. The protagonist, listening thoughtfully, said, "In short, it's a very annoying country, isn't it?" The butler said so. Rumor has it they're targeting the eastern plains. MC wondered if that was true, what would happen to the nomads. Lifa told him they'd be treated like a labor force with no rights. Sigmund was surprised. And why? The girl continued. Nomads are a mix of beastmen and elves, as well as humans. The Holy Land is intolerant of such surrogates, so it persecutes them. The protagonist was even more surprised. Persecuted? Sybil said, absolutely right. Some nomads were even driven from their lands due to persecution by the Holy Land. The protagonist drawled. Apparently, they're a nuisance to literally everyone. Then why not destroy it? Sigmund realized his answer was unexpected, judging by the butler's expression. He said with puzzlement, although it's not so much fun invading the plains next to the forest, is it? MC noted with a smile. True, but it seemed demons were feared precisely for their belligerence. He wanted to live in peace, so he had no intention of attacking anyone. He'd better think about what could be done here. Sometime later, getting ready for bed, the protagonist mused. This world is just a swarm of conflicts, right? Perhaps it was a good thing he hadn't left the forest without a plan. At first, he was just a ghost. Looking back, all he did was wander the dungeon. Now he had a home, hobbies, and even golems. And of course, a beautiful maid. Before he could think about it, Lifa addressed him. The protagonist jumped in surprise, exclaiming, when did she even manage to come? The girl had answered him, just now. MC noticed. That's how it was. He thought he hadn't noticed her because he was lost in thought. Sigmund had asked her point blank why she came to him almost every night. She sadly asked him why he avoided her every night. What was the reason for this? The protagonist didn't know how to tell her. For him, everything in this world was wrong. He clearly remembered that he was Japanese. Although his memories were vague, such things were only allowed to special people, like a girlfriend or a wife. He couldn't forget about it. Lifa asked him in bewilderment. Couldn't she become special to him? She placed her palm on his face and looked deeply into his eyes. Sigmund wondered what he was doing. Lifa didn't mind either. She even told him that she would serve him for the rest of her days. That was something special. The girl called him by name, but he didn't hear her, continuing to think. He didn't know what he thought of her, but she was too beautiful for him. She was the only girl who could teach him about this world, which he didn't know at all. And besides, Lifa always supported him. The protagonist chuckled. That already means something to him, doesn't it? The protagonist addressed her by name and admitted he'd never done that before. Just don't let her laugh at him. Lifa smiled softly at him and said, okay, he noted, already laughing. The next day, MC decided to check the harvest. Looking at the olives, he happily said, they're growing well, even in winter. Sigmund praised the golems for their excellent work. He thought that when the golems took over the farm, he had more free time. He began spending it growing olives for oil and took up pottery. The protagonist told himself that thanks to the clean river, they had no problems with water, and the forest had an abundance of meat, and the vegetable growing was going well too. After all, he wanted to become self-sufficient. He didn't want to return to life in the dungeon and drink demon blood like in the good old days. Then the protagonist began making pottery. He mixed clay found in the mountains with the baked bones of demons and used his earth magic skill. If he fired it with fire magic, it would become bone china. He also made silverware from minerals mined in the mine, as well as wooden utensils. Perhaps because the earth is rich in magical power, the veins in the forests contain not only iron, copper, gold, and silver. Rare ores like mithril and adamantite can be found here. Unlike mineral deposits on the ground, they are more like in-game item drops. The protagonist was so engrossed in his work that he didn't notice how time had passed, and Lifa came to invite him to dinner. The protagonist told her he was on his way. He thought Lifa was helping him relax just by looking at her. Sybil remarked, turning to him, it seems everything is going well? MC replied that it was, and thanked the old man for everything. Sigmund saw golems waving at him through the window. He waved back, thanking them as well. Blanc and Noir had also gotten the hang of things. They announced in a loud voice that they'd prepared a sauté of demon meat today. The protagonist found himself thinking that his mansion had become more lively. At first, there was no one here. Well, something to strive for. People called this forest an abyss, but he wanted to protect it with all his might. After some time, Abaddon's detectives were searching the city of Sebel. Afterward, they reported to their master. They'd undoubtedly done some shopping here, but they weren't sure where they went afterward. Abaddon noticed to the left. The detectives thanked him for the tip and remarked, this old man is hard to find, right? He asked them how it went. They told him there were many witnesses, but all they could find was that they'd bought a bunch of stuff, including plant seeds and supplies, as if they'd started a farm. Abaddon remarked, finding this hard to believe. In any case, they needed to broaden their search. He and the messenger would search the suburbs, and they would search friendly human cities. On that note, they parted ways. Meanwhile, the protagonist was installing something on the edge of the forest. Sebel looked puzzled. The protagonist asked him what was going on. The butler replied, nothing. But what was the device he was installing? MC, smiling, informed him it was an alarm. If the Holy Land's troops invaded their territory, the device would alert them. The old man agreed. Yes, they needed forces for defense. Sigmund said, stretching his body. That's true. Golems are busy with agriculture. Suddenly an idea occurred to him. He exclaimed, yes, there was someone in the forest who could help them. Meanwhile, the great tyrant, the six-legged bear Asura, was busy in the forest, uprooting trees with his fangs. When the protagonist approached him, Azra stood up, raised his four paws, and roared. The protagonist drew his magic sword from its sheath and pointed it at Azra. He immediately fell silent and fell to the ground. MC smiled and said, "That's great." He approached him and asked if he would live with him. The bear stood up, called him Azra, and said he would like him to patrol the border between the western countries and the steppes. MC showed him the borders, and the bear carefully memorized the information. The protagonist said that first, he needed to raise his level so he could confront the fighters of the Holy Land. At that moment, a monster appeared, which Azra destroyed in a split second. The delighted protagonist continued, saying that afterward, he would teach him not to harm civilians. The bear's next opponent was a large boar. Azra defeated him in no time, receiving the enemy's magical core. Sigmund asked his new ally what was going on. He activated his evaluation points and noted with surprise that he'd mastered a new skill, Searing Breath. Let him try using it. When Azra complied with his master's command, a powerful stream of fire erupted from his mouth, nearly burning MC. He had to activate his water magic skill to avoid being burned. When the smoke cleared, everything within sight was scorched and destroyed. Sigmund cautiously told Azra, "This skill is forbidden, except in emergencies." After some time, when Azra's stats and characteristics had increased, the protagonist told him, now he will teach him how to behave when meeting a human. After some time, Bakal, the holy king of their holy land of Zirad, angrily asked the speaker, "What do you mean they can't invade the steppe?" Rodin, the commander of the Holy Land's army, replied, "Yes, that's true. The road to the steppe is occupied by a terrifying demon. The Holy Land army cannot pass." His Majesty exclaimed in irritation. "Damn demons. They must be destroyed. His country is blessed by the offspring of God. There should be no problems." Rodin said timidly, "If the demon were as His Majesty said, he wouldn't have reported it. He would have dealt with it himself." The king exclaimed, "Yes, that's how it should be." The commander responded, but the demon was anything but simple. The scouts examined the creature with their evaluation glasses and concluded that it was the great tyrant Asura. Bakal remarked in bewilderment, "What does that mean?" Rodin said, "The great tyrant Asura is an S-class demon dwelling in the center of the abyss, and that speaks volumes." His Majesty asked, "How strong is he?" The commander hunched his shoulders and replied, "They must be prepared for their entire Holy Land army to be destroyed." The king, finally grasping the gravity of the problem, said in amazement, "Is it impossible? So many." Rodin added, he'd heard that even Lord Baal, whom he knew well, was afraid of him. Baal drawled, perplexed. He still couldn't believe the demon lord was dead. After that, he began hurling vile curses at Azur for interfering with the will of a god. The commander lowered his head, avoiding His Majesty's gaze. When Rodin left the throne room, Valka asked him sympathetically, "Is he sighing again? How had everything gone? Had the king given the go-ahead for preparations?" The commander replied that he hadn't asked that. The Holy King should be revered, but his attitude toward war left much to be desired. Valka whispered in his ear, "Yes, it would be impolite to ask the Holy King. In any case, they wouldn't stand if they did nothing." Rodin said that perhaps it would be best to deal with them once and for all. Meanwhile, the protagonist continued training Azra. The protagonist told Lifa that he was doing a good job. The troops, resembling scouts from the Holy Land, retreated upon seeing him. As long as they didn't attack, they would remain silent. The girl answered that she could understand that he didn't want to start a conflict, but wouldn't it be better, just in case, to strengthen the house's defenses? MC said that they really didn't know what the Holy Land would do. Maybe build a guard golem? He'd seen one in the dungeon. Lifa remarked that it was a good idea. Sigmund said that he would then look for materials, and she should continue teaching Blanc and Noir how to sew. The girl answered him with a smile. Yes, they were quick learners. So soon she would be out of work. Noir and Blanc said that Master Sigmund was their master. He should rest more. The protagonist muttered, feeling a little guilty, like some kind of rich guy. He said goodbye to Lifa and went to get materials. Finding suitable stones from the former abyssal dungeon, he declared that they would make excellent material for a stone golem. The protagonist activated his golem creation skill and quickly created several golems. Afterwards, he ordered them to remain here and guard the perimeter, as well as fight off any enemies that appeared. He added that they would level up as they grew. After some time, MC announced, after creating the stone golems, the next step on the plan is a soft rug for the bed. Magic and alchemy could be used to make iron, but it's too thin to shape into springs. Starting to create the mattress first, he muttered that the painstaking work suited him, but he needed to do it as quickly as possible. Lifa almost never uses her bed. His thoughts were drifting off in a completely different direction, and Sigmund told himself to calm down. At that moment, Lifa and Sibyl suddenly entered his room. He flinched in surprise. The girl had turned to him and asked if they could talk to him. The protagonist, having mastered his emotions, asked about what exactly. He was listening attentively. After they voiced their request, the protagonist exclaimed in surprise. They wanted to become his blood relatives? That meant they would both become vampires. Were they absolutely certain of that? The butler calmly replied that it was. The old man added that this would make him immortal. They hadn't missed a single level up, but the lifespan restrictions hadn't been lifted. The protagonist remarked, but this was even better. Where he came from, people said life was precious because it would eventually end. Lifa responded emotionally, no, for them, the most terrible thing is the fact that they could leave him, dying forever. Sigmund added, placing his hand on his chest, they don't want to be squires who abandon their master. MC wondered in confusion, is this another hallmark of demons? After thinking for a moment, he told them that if they wanted it, he couldn't refuse. Lifa and Seville smiled happily and looked at each other. Sigmund thought that, to be honest, it was still hard for him to accept everything with his commoner mentality, but he was very happy for both of them. Baring his wrist, he said, he'd never made a blood relationship, so he doesn't know what it's really like. He can't guarantee comfort with vampire weaknesses like sun and silver, or that they'll develop a desire to drink blood. Are they sure of their decision? A dark aura began to emanate from him. Lifa and Sebel resolutely declared, they're ready. The protagonist said then, they begin. The protagonist cut his hand and poured his blood into the mouths of the butler and his granddaughter. Lifa closed her eyes and froze for a moment. When she looked at her hands, MC asked her eagerly, how are you? She remained silent. He became alarmed and said, yes, it's daytime. Is she sick or uncomfortable? Perhaps it would be better at night. The girl laughed and assured him she was fine. After some time, he concluded that Lifa and Sebel were as resistant to vampire weaknesses as he was. However, their characteristics were still weaker. They didn't regenerate as quickly and they weren't immortal. The butler noted, however, that his lifespan was extended and he didn't want to drink blood. So in his mind, everything was fine. The protagonist, continuing to craft the bed, answered, but he definitely didn't want any more blood relatives. Sometime later, the head of the Volk family was cautiously making his way through the forest with his family, his wife, and 2 daughters. Suddenly, a huge worm pounced on them from behind the bushes. Volk shielded Lunora and his daughters with his body and told them to leave quickly. His wife was about to object, but he looked at her in a way that suggested she was about to do as he said. Suddenly, the woman exclaimed in surprise, there are 2 of them? Volk froze, trying to figure out the best course of action. Lunora shielded her daughters with her body. At that moment, Lifa and Sybil appeared before them, dispatching the monsters in an instant. The woman, surprised, asked them who they were. Lifa countered by asking them what they were doing here. The forest was very dangerous. Their master wanted to protect them as they entered and invited them into his home. She looked at them closely and noted, are the man and woman demons? She continued. Or maybe they could lead them out of the forest. What do they want? Folk hesitated, but Lunora answered, they're accepting their offer. Her husband was about to protest, wondering why she was making such decisions. Lunora replied, they can't get through the forest on their own. Their daughters were at the limit of their strength. Folk, looking at the girls, couldn't help but agree with his wife. After a while, they approached the house. The protagonist himself came out to greet them, congratulating them on their return home. Lifa and Sable informed him they were back. The protagonist looked at the unexpected guests, told them his name, and added that he was the master of this place. Folk told him his name in return. Lunora told him hers and introduced him to their daughters, Malula and Lalana. The head of the family eyed the master of the house warily. Lunora asked him, they saved them, didn't they? They were so grateful. MC said they sensed their presence by accident, so they shouldn't worry. They were nomads, right? If they didn't mind, he'd ask them why they'd come here. They knew it was dangerous, didn't they? Folk chuckled, and Lunora told him they'd been attacked. They were originally from the Western lands, but at the time, the West was at war with a demon kingdom. She and her husband had moved to the steppes in the east. Sigmund thought, well, understandably, after they became nomads, the overlord had changed and a truce had ensued. The woman continued, after moving they had more livestock, she had 2 children, and they lived a simple but peaceful life. And then suddenly they were attacked by another group of nomads, perhaps bandits or thugs. The butler noted that they were people fleeing war and persecution, so their motives would be varied. Lunora added that they had nowhere to run. All they could do was enter the abyssal forest. The protagonist was sorry to hear that. It was good that he found out about everything. He thanked them for telling him their story. At that moment, the girls told their mother they were hungry. The woman became embarrassed and, scolding her daughters, apologized to MC. Siebel, with his characteristic tact, pretended not to notice, and Sigmund offered them dinner. When the servants set the table, the girls gazed delightedly at the baked chicken. After tasting the dish, they exclaimed in admiration, it's so delicious. Their mother reproachfully told them to behave themselves. The protagonist reassured Lunora, saying everything was fine, let her give them a break. Blanc and Noir were only too happy that they were enjoying themselves. Sable brought the children juice. The protagonist told Lunora and Volk that they grew their own food, so there was plenty of food. They could stay here until they were stronger and felt comfortable. Then they could discuss their next steps. If they were heading to the Western lands, he could take them halfway there or to the demon kingdom. Lunora, embarrassed by his kindness and generosity, thanked him. The butler escorted the family to their room. When Sybil returned, the protagonist said, referring to the guests, I wonder what they'll come for. The old man replied that he had doubts about them. Well, he'd go and make some sweets for them. Sigmund looked at him with a smile and thought, he has Lifa, so he knows how to please children. The couple seemed like good people to him. He hoped everything would be fine. Volk, waiting for Lunora to put the children to sleep, told her they should leave this place immediately. The woman asked him why. He said it was abnormal to build such a house and live in an ominous forest. Lunora said they really were demons. Volk exclaimed, then she understands how dangerous it is here. The woman added, but without their help, they would already be dead. The head of the family said he understood this, but they could be plotting something. Lunora responded indignantly, saying that it was certainly hard to accept that anyone would decide to live here. She adjusted their daughter's blankets and continued. But after all, they saved them from demons, gave them food, and a soft bed. Please, don't let him leave a negative impression. The man repeated, perplexed. A negative impression? Their concern could be a trap to catch them off guard. He can't trust them. Lunora told him that yes, she couldn't believe their altruism either, but she also didn't believe they would harm them. Why would they need them? What could they give them if they had nothing? Volk said nothing in response, only thinking that he was worried about her. Finally, he said, she doesn't understand, they're demons, and looked at her sadly. Meanwhile, the protagonist, sipping wine, activated his passive hearing enhancement skill and told Seville he didn't want to eavesdrop. The butler replied that it was okay in an emergency. The protagonist said they thought he'd saved them on purpose. They were elves, weren't they? They have very long ears. The old man replied, an elven race. They're especially wary of others. Judging by their appearance, they'd have a hard time in the demon city. Lifa mused, yes. But even if they returned to the plains, they could be attacked again at any moment. She wouldn't want the children to be attacked. MC agreed. Sibyl noted that Volk, despite his vigilance, would never be hostile to a master who saved his life. Perhaps it was because their master was too handsome a man? Lifa said it was true. Sigmund exclaimed in bewilderment. What are they talking about? The girl answered, they're talking about jealousy. Perhaps it's hard to sympathize with someone as strong as their master. The protagonist countered, no, even he can understand jealousy. The butler, still cooking, added, Folk has nothing. He must protect his beloved wife and children with his own body. And then he, Sigmund, appears, possessing both power and wealth, and he provided them with the security he should have provided himself. At least, that's what the demons would think. The protagonist retorted, military might is one thing, financial power another. He clutched his head and said, he's lived autonomously for so long that he's forgotten. Perhaps he should talk to him? The old man replied that he didn't think it was a good idea. Lifa asked her grandfather if perhaps he should do it. The old man replied that he'd better keep an eye on them. MC thought the more men they had, be they farmers or brewers, the better. He wouldn't mind them staying. He was sure they'd be able to support a family. The rest was up to them. The next morning, he walked into the dining room and greeted everyone with a smile. Lunora also greeted him and thanked him for providing a place to rest. Malula exclaimed, the bed is soft and fluffy. She was so warm that she fell asleep right away. Lilana said she, too, had slept happily. The protagonist, smiling at their childish innocence, replied, he's very happy. Their beds were well made. After a while, the protagonist noted they hadn't had a chance to discuss everything all day, but he understood. Now it was time to wait. He wished them bon appetit. Malula asked him what bon appetit meant. He explained it was like the greeting they said before a meal in his hometown. He suddenly wondered if he'd loved children in his past life. He couldn't remember it at all. After eating, the girls decided to go for a walk. Lunora told them not to go outside the gate. The golems were planting at the time. When the children ran up to the trees, they exclaimed in surprise, fruit. The golem pointed to them and said they were apples. He handed the girls an apple each, and they ate it with delight, praising how delicious it was. Sigmund laughingly told them, but only one at a time, not to overeat before dinner. The girls agreed, finished nibbling on the apples, and ran off to explore the grounds, delighted with everything they saw. The protagonist, sipping his tea, said to Lifa, it's amazing how curious children can be. He watched them from afar. The girl asked him if he was tired. The protagonist answered, not at all. Oddly enough, he felt cheerful. She noted with a smile, that's how it was. Lifa was just about to have tea with him when Lunora arrived. The girl asked if she could help her with something. The woman replied that she needed to talk to them. MC invited her to the table and prepared to listen. Lunora said she would speak frankly. Could he allow their family to live here? He was surprised but didn't show it, only asking her, what about her husband? The woman sheepishly replied that he was categorically against it. Sigmund remarked that they probably fought about this often. He wouldn't want his influence to destroy their family. Her daughters needed a father. He was sure Lunora understood perfectly well. After a moment's silence, he added that he was a vampire. The woman was taken aback by this news and said in surprise, but he worked outside during the day. The protagonist explained to her that he was a special kind of vampire, resistant to light. Whatever the case, his nature could lead to trouble in the future. She would have to talk to her husband again. Lunora, daring, asked him if she could ask him a question. Having received a positive answer, she asked him directly if he would drink their blood, like the vampires of legend. The protagonist chuckled to himself, quite curious. Out loud, he answered no. It was possible, of course, to gain power from them, but he hadn't even considered such a thing. Whether to believe him or not was up to them. The woman considered this, MC added, and lastly, there were still downsides to staying. He looked at her carefully and said, there are no other children here. Won't they be bored here? Lunora looked at him in surprise, then smiled and said, yes, indeed. she will keep that in mind. Sigmund concluded that if they wanted to stay after all the discussions, they would be only too happy. Lifa added with a smile that this was true. The woman rose from the table, bowed to him, and said she would talk to her husband again. When she left, the protagonist remarked how tired he was. Lifa asked him if he wanted another drink. MC responded positively. She poured him more tea, and he declared, "Her drink is like a healing elixir. Thank her very much." He was a little nervous, but he was confident his guests would be fine. Sometime later, the protagonists, the golems, and Lunora were working in the garden. Lifa informed them that their tea was ready. The protagonist turned to the woman and suggested she take a break. She shouted to her daughters that it was time for them to drink tea. When the children came running at her call, she gasped in surprise. They were so dirty. MC remarked that everything would be fine. Let them just stand there. He cast a light magical cleansing, and the girls, looking at themselves in surprise, joyfully exclaimed, "They're clean." Lunora said in amazement to Sigmund, "He's standing so calmly in the sun, she can't believe he's a vampire." He laughed in response and asked if she should stop calling him by his title. "He's not a nobleman from any country. He doesn't like that sort of thing." She smiled and told him, as he says. The girls asked Blanc and Noir what they were having for snack today. They smiled and told them, "Fruit pie." Their mother smiled and remarked that life here was so abundant. The forest and rivers seemed endless. The protagonist answered her, "Yes, they get their water from the forest." The woman exclaimed, "Truly amazing. Such fields and how clean the rooms were." She hadn't even seen such cleanliness in the city. The kitchen, the toilet, especially the bathtub, she didn't know you could do such a thing with free access to water. She often reminds her children that this is something special. After all, if they get used to it, it will be hard for them when they leave the mansion. The protagonist had noticed, and it was true. He thought that it seemed Lunora and the children had decided to stay. And what about Volk? After a while, Lunora's husband told him he was leaving. Sigmund asked him, "Is he sure?" The man adjusted his gloves and told him that after spending several days here, he realized they meant them no harm. But they were elves, and it was difficult for them to live with other races. He believed it was their nature. He wanted to provide a place for his wife and children, as they couldn't stay here forever. The protagonist clarified this with him, but for now he wanted him to protect them. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he would take care of it. Volk countered that he trusted his wife and her judgment of others. After all, when he, Sigmund, learned he was leaving, he even provided him with all this equipment. He wore clothes and a cloak made from the hide of the tyrant Asura, Sable's illusions, and Lifa's threads, plus Sigmund's magic. A bow made from the wood of the bottomless forest, and a slender sword made from mithril ore. Volk bowed to him and thanked him heartily. MC was lost in thought for a moment, then replied, "Nothing, everything's fine." At that moment, Lunora approached them with the children and asked her husband if he was leaving already. Volk told her yes, he'd come back and get them. He hugged his daughters, and the woman sadly asked him to take care. The protagonist told him Azra would lead him out of the forest. The man asked him how to climb it. The girls sadly asked him if he was leaving. Volk told them yes, he was going far away to find work, and they should wait for him. He climbed Asra and set off. The daughters waved to their father and shouted for him to come back soon. Lunora also sadly watched her husband leave. After a while, Malula tried the dessert and exclaimed, "It's delicious." Lilana said she wanted it too. The protagonist, watching the girls with a smile, said, "Finally, they're done with the fields and can rest a bit." He asked Lunora what she wanted to do in her free time. The woman told him that, to be honest, she wanted to ask him to teach her children their letters. The protagonist was surprised. Letters? She'd noticed there were books in the house, so he could read, right? MC said, "Of course." He thought, ever since he came to this world, the letters looked like Japanese. Lifa had told him that reading and writing weren't common among the population. Only nobles, other high-ranking people, and merchants could. Lunora said, "I understand." She could read and write to some extent, but she thought he knew much more about it. Sigmund didn't know if he could teach the girls, but he would try. He said out loud, he'd never taught anyone before, so if it was something he could do, he would. The woman thanked him, and the girls looked at them puzzled. That evening, Lifa brought him paper, ink, and a writing quill. He wanted to see if he could even write. Until now, he'd only read. He tried to write the letters the same way he wrote Japanese. After writing the first letter, Sigmund realized it still looked like Japanese. The protagonist asked the girl what she would say to that. Lifa looked and said, "Yes, of course, that's the first letter." MC was surprised. Apparently, even Liafa could read it. As an automatic translation, it was easy. He said, "I think he can teach the girls the letters without any problem." The girl agreed. Sometime later, Abaddon reported to Demolus. They'd searched every inch of the Demon Kingdom, but they still hadn't found Lord Siebel. The only thing left was the Abyssal Forest. Demolus noted that it was true that Lord Siebel had been supporting the last Demon King from behind the scenes. He respected him too, but he didn't think he had a place in his forest. Abaddon replied that he understood what Lord Demolus was trying to tell him. By all rights, the only thing that awaited them was death. The old man remarked that it was good that he understood this. They should at least search. Abaddon agreed with him. Demolus activated his magical power and spoke, combining his magic with Lord Abaddon's messenger, saying they can search the depths of the forest. That way, they could safely observe without engaging in combat. They sent a magical scout into the abyssal forest and began to observe what was happening. Suddenly, the scout encountered a protective barrier. Demolus exclaimed in surprise, "What is that? A wall? What is it doing here?" They lifted the magical scout above the wall. He asked, "What's that? Is that a golem?" Damalis said it looked odd. "Are those elves? What are elven children doing here?" Abaddon told him he needed to look. Damalis looked to the side and saw Sable. Sable was standing by the window, then turned and looked out the window. The messenger, seeing him, became frightened and fled. Damalis said the messenger had escaped after all. Abaddon replied that they needed to report everything to the Overlord. At that moment, MC called Sebel and said he'd noticed an unfamiliar demon, small, harmless, yet strange. Sebel replied that it was a messenger and must have been sent on reconnaissance, perhaps even one of his acquaintances. Sigmund asked again, "One of his acquaintances?" Sebel said he'd sensed the magic of two beings in that demon. It belonged to one of his acquaintances, with whom he served in the kingdom. He guessed they'd noticed they'd stopped showing up at their old house and sent them out to look. MC was surprised, saying, "Oh, good thing they didn't shoot him." He turned to Sebel and asked if he'd been the former Overlord's advisor. They'd been worried since they couldn't find him. Sebel thought for a moment, then replied that it was his fault for not warning them in advance. He asked MC if he could go. He needed to check on them and find out the situation. Sigmund replied positively and said everything was fine. He was sure he'd find something to talk about with his old friends, so he shouldn't worry about him and shouldn't rush. Lifa asked if the prime ministers loved him, right? Sebel replied that he wouldn't argue with that. With his permission, he'd be back soon. And finally, the children's sweets mustn't run out. They mustn't forget. The Demon Kingdom. Vandert asked, "So they found him?" Damalis answered affirmatively and said, "In the Forest of the Abyss." Vandert asked if he was safe. He replied that, judging by what the messenger had seen, he was in good health. But there was something strange. The Overlord asked, "So what?" He replied that the land had been cleared. There was a large mansion, and nearby were vast fields. It looked like he lived there with other races, including elves. Iglis told Abaddon that he shouldn't lie to him. Were his eyes completely rotten? Abaddon became angry and replied, did he really think he would lie to the Overlord? Iglis nervously replied negatively and said he hadn't thought about it. He was simply surprised. Vandert said he could understand his frustration. After all, it was the Abyss. Iglis said, in other words, there was safe land in the dangerous forest? If it belonged to Sable, then was that land part of the Demon Kingdom? Damalis and Abaddon were surprised. Damalis realized something and said they were medicinal herbs. Iglis replied that he was right. Medicinal herbs grow in lands rich in magical power. The higher the concentration of magic, the more effective the medicinal herbs. If they could cultivate highly effective medicinal herbs in the abyssal forest, the Demon Kingdom would be able to produce potions superior to those of other countries. The Overlord asked if they could buy the land for a sizable reward. He was sure Sebel would gladly agree. Sebel came to them and said he was afraid it was impossible. He asked how long he had been here, or rather, it was impolite to show up without the Overlord's invitation. Iglis said they should wait. It had been a long time, and they were worried. Sebel told him they hadn't seen each other in a while. The Overlord approached him and said they were just talking about him. Sebel asked if it was about the land. Iglis responded positively and said that with a suitable reward in exchange for the land, he thought the matter was solvable. Sebel smiled and replied that he refused. Abaddon asked angrily, is he refusing to obey the Lord's orders? Sebel replied that he was no longer a citizen of the Demon Kingdom. He had found someone he would serve for the rest of his life. Iglis said that was sheer nonsense. Sebel glared at him and said that he deserved to die. An ominous atmosphere filled the room. Iglis wondered in surprise, what kind of power is this? He was as strong as the former Demon Lord. No, it was even more so. Sebel said that with magical power like theirs, they should not disturb his master. The Lord asked in surprise, what? Sebel replied that these lands belonged to his master, the Immortal King, and he advised them not to disturb him. Iglis said, just don't tell him that he really had changed masters. Sebel replied, unless, of course, they wish to avoid defeat. That's another story. For now, he merely gave them advice. Afterward, he vanished. Iglis, surprised, said he had vanished into the fog. Abaddon asked the Lord if he was all right. He answered affirmatively and said, Immortal King, who dwells in that land, they must determine whether he poses a threat to the Demon Kingdom. Damalis turned to Abaddon and asked if he thought he had Sable's son under his command. Abaddon said that he did. His name was Rude, and he was one of his own. Iglis said that one of his subordinates was his wife, Lagia. Vandert said that they should then investigate the house. Rude and Lagia arrived in the Demon Kingdom. Damalis announced their presence. They bowed and greeted the Demon Lord. Rude said he was a civil servant of Rude's. Lagia said she was Lagia's military commander. They had come at his command. Vandert said they were free to stand. He turned to Iglis. Iglis responded affirmatively and said he wanted to entrust the two of them with a very important mission. Lagia wondered, surprised, in the presence of the Demon Lord himself? What kind of mission was that? Iglis asked, they know the Abyss Force, don't they? According to the latest reports, their relatives, Sable and Lifa, had settled in the depths of the Abyss. Rude, surprised, said they needed to wait. With all due respect, isn't this a mistake? His father was indeed hiding in the Abyss, but he didn't finish, as Iglis interrupted him and said they had witnesses. Abaddon said it was true. He and Demalis had confirmed the information through a messenger. Lagia asked, but what would her father-in-law be doing there? Demolus replied that he understood they found it hard to believe, but it seemed Sibyl had undergone an evolution. Rude, shocked, asked, a revolution? After reaching the highest level, he transforms into a superior race. He'd read about this in ancient texts. Iglis responded affirmatively. Abaddon turned to him, wondering if he'd understood. He said their mission was to go and check on them. Rude said they needed to wait. Was Lifa there too? The next moment, he abruptly approached Aben and asked if she was safe. Lagia told him he should calm down. Judging by their words, it seemed Lifa was with her father-in-law, correct? Abaddon replied that it was true. He quietly said he was too calm for Iglis's subordinate. Iglis looked at him questioningly. After that, they approached the table with the map. He said they were here. Rude shouted madly. In the center of the forest, his dear Lifa. Much further west. Vandert said they were most likely safe. They had sworn allegiance to the one who lived in the forest. He must have influenced their evolution. He wants them to find out if their master is hostile to the demon kingdom. Lagia asked, Immortal King? Demolus replied that Sibyl had said so. There was a chance of staying in the abyssal forest forever, so he wouldn't blame them if they refused. What was their answer? Lagia said she would go. Rude replied that he would go with her. After some time, in the end, Sibyl returned immediately, as he had promised. Sibyl said that he knew the messenger belonged to the demon kingdom, so he had scared them well and was sure they wouldn't act strangely. Since they had already decided everything, a few days later, MC called Sibyl and Lifa and told them that he had detected the magical power of two living beings. Could they take a look? Lifa said it was the magic of her father, Rude, and her mother, Lagia. With so much magic, she would say the forest was dangerous for them. Sibyl agreed with her and said that Lagia had a decent amount of magic, but his son did. Lifa said that if he died it would be a big deal, and she would go and get them. MC quietly said, what's wrong? They were her parents. He then said that he thought they had come here to meet them. Sibyl denied this and said that they were on an inspection mission. Since they were both under the Demon Lord's command, they had most likely come to see him. Sibyl then apologized for the trouble they had caused him. Sigmund replied that he owed them a favor, so he believed they could resolve the matter peacefully. If they returned home with a good impression, the demon kingdom would not become enemies. Sibyl thanked him for his hospitality. MC remembered something and said that Lunora and the girls were currently playing in the garden. For their safety, he would suggest they move indoors, but he should be careful. Sigmund waved at her and said it was time for treats. They had prepared sweets. Malula and Lalana were delighted and, running up to MC, asked, where are the sweets? MC told them he would first cleanse them of dirt. They couldn't bring them into the house like that. After that, he used cleansing magic. Lunora asked the girls if they had promised to wash their hands before eating. Had they remembered? Malula happily replied that she had. Lalana said so too. After that, they climbed onto MC. Sigmund called Blanc and Noir and told them to take them to a safe room and treat them to some sweets. Blanc and Noir simultaneously responded positively. Lifa said they would join them a little later. Sibyl said he would take care of the hospitality. MC thanked him and said he was counting on him. He thought that after all, he was the owner of the house. At this time, Rude and Lagia were walking through the forest. Lagia hid behind a tree. Rude asked her how much longer they had left. Lagia gestured for Rude to be quiet and said they were not far away. They should proceed carefully so as not to be detected by demons. After that, they headed deeper into the forest. He said that it seemed quiet here. At that moment, Lifa, emerging from the bushes, told them that she was glad she had made it. Rude, seeing her, loudly shouted her name. They saw a large bear behind her and were terrified. He told her she needed to run quickly. Lifa turned around and said it was okay. It wasn't safe for them to be here. They heard a sound behind them and turned around. A monster attacked them from the bushes. It attacked Rude. Lagia called out to him. However, at that moment, the bear decided to protect them and attacked the snake. Rude was splashed with blood, and he wondered in shock what was happening. Lagia asked, did it protect them? Lifa replied that it was Azra, one of the master's household. Rude, wiping away the blood, asked, Azra's household? Then he fell to the ground. Lagia called out to him and said he needed to regain consciousness. She thought that it was impossible to make a servant out of such a monster. What kind of power were they dealing with? Lifa told them that she would take them to her master. She became a beautiful girl. They loaded Rude onto Azra and set off. Lagia thought that Azra the bear was one of the strongest monsters in the forest. She had no doubt about it, the strongest possible. How could it be controlled? She wondered what kind of creature this immortal king was. Lifa said they needed to go here. They arrived at Sigmund's house. Lagia, shocked, asked what kind of place this was. Was it a golem? Lifa answered positively and said the master had made it for farm work. Lagia said, for farm work? But weren't 4 golems too strong? Lifa replied that compared to what was outside the forest, perhaps so, but with the exception of the largest golem, the others only moved through the forest. Lifa slung her father over her shoulder and said they should go into the house. She thought that just because they could roam the forest didn't mean the farm golems were stronger than all the others in the demon kingdom. They entered the house, and Lifa announced that she had returned. Sibyl greeted her. Lagia said they hadn't seen each other for a long time. He replied that they hadn't seen each other for a long time, and Rude was unconscious as always. Where had he gone wrong in raising him? Coming here with him had been reckless. Lagia told him he had moved house without telling her. She couldn't leave it like that. Sibyl replied that he was sorry, but she had acted bravely. Lagia thought he wasn't the least bit sorry. Lifa called them over and said they needed to stop this to say hello to the master. Sibyl responded affirmatively and said by the way. After that, he grabbed Rude by the collar and Lifa slapped her father in the face. Lagia shouted at her that he was her father after all. Rude woke up and called for his wife and daughter. Sibyl stood in front of him and with a menacing expression told him he was awake. Rude, frightened, called for him. Sibyl asked how long he was going to lie there and suffer. He needed to get up. Lifa said they should come this way. Her master is merciful. Rude asked, Master? Lagia covered his mouth and thanked them for the invitation. Rude thought he hadn't expected Lifa and his father to be so loyal. It was true that demons had a habit of following the strongest, especially his father, who hadn't been entirely loyal even to the previous lord. After that, they entered the room. Lagia said with surprise that the sofa was very comfortable. Lifa said that the master had made it. Lagia asked her, did he? What was she talking about? Lifa replied that the house, the furniture, all of it had been made by the master, the golem, the fields. Lagia thought she couldn't even imagine what he was like. After that, the door opened and MC walked into the room. He greeted them. MC thought he should have asked Sebol how they greeted each other in the demon kingdom. After that, he sat down on the sofa and told them they could sit down. Rude thought he was going crazy, but that was it. He looked at Sigmund and thought he was a monster. Lagia looked at Rude and quietly asked him, how could they tell them such a thing? Lagia thanked him for accepting them so quickly. Her name is Lagia, she is Lifa's mother. Rude said that he was her father. He didn't have time to finish because Sebel hit him. Rude told him that it hurt. Sebel apologized to MC. Lifa said that her father was rude to him. After that, she also hit Rude on the head. Rude indignantly asked her, was she the same? Lagia replied that he should forgive her husband's disrespect. Rude was surprised by her words. Sigmund said with a smile that he didn't mind, but they shouldn't hit him. MC thought that he felt very sorry for him. Sigmund said, however, that he wasn't the strongest creature in the world. She could relax. Sable replied negatively, saying that with all due respect, demons bow to those in power. Lifa agreed, saying that her father's rudeness was unforgivable. Rude said that his father and the others were old-fashioned in their thinking. Wasn't that why the last overlord had been so cruel? MC thought that they certainly weren't bothered by his behavior. Maybe they really were as good as he thought. Sibyl said, so, Lagia and Rude came to see Sigmund, right? They risked their lives to get here. MC told Sibyl he shouldn't be so intimidating. Sibyl said he knew the demon kingdom would act after the messenger's arrival, but he didn't expect them to send his family on such a dangerous mission. Demolus or Abaddon must have orchestrated the whole thing. They seemed genuinely concerned about his situation. Sigmund asked thoughtfully, so they want to get to know his past? Rude hesitantly replied that it was his father's fault. He heard him call him an immortal king as he left, and then he disappeared into his mist. MC wondered, so he publicly announced that he was a direct servant of the vampire. The former demon lord's butler stood with a member of the vampire family, more powerful than themselves. Rude then told Lifa that's why he was so worried about her. Sigmund thought, besides, if they found out he was strolling peacefully in the sun, he wasn't sure the powers that be would ignore him. After that, he said, well, he was sorry they had to come all this way, since he was simply relaxing in the forest and living in solitude. He had no intention of antagonizing the demon kingdom, and they were welcome to come and visit Sable and Lifa. Lifa said that next time, they should inform her in advance via messenger. Lagia responded affirmatively and said that they would do so. MC took a sip and thought he was glad everything had worked out. Sable said he didn't know what stories he'd been told, but he and Lifa still respected the Lord. If the Holy Kingdom were to join forces with other countries to invade them, they should convey to the prime ministers that they would help the demon kingdom in its time of need. Rude asked him if that was true. Sable smiled and answered affirmatively. Sigmund clapped his hands and said, well, he thinks they've had enough of this serious talk. He can see they're tired from the journey here. He turned to Sable and Lifa and asked if they would prepare food and a bath for the guests. Sable bowed and answered affirmatively. He then told them to follow him. Rude and Lagia simultaneously answered affirmatively. After they left, Lifa asked MC if he was tired. Sigmund told her she could spend time today. She thanked him. Then MC said, here, he wishes her to enjoy the evening. He handed her the bottle. Rude said it was amazing. Incredible. What the hell was that? Hot water from the tap. Lagia said the bath was simply incomparable. Rude asked how they would use magical powers if they were constantly heating it over the fire. Lagia sat on the bed and said that the bed too was so fluffy. Rude said that he didn't know how everything here was so unusual. Lifa said that they make their own alcohol too. At that moment, Rude, who had taken a sip, choked on her words. Lagia told him that he increasingly didn't understand who they were dealing with. Lifa told them that the master is the master. After a wild evening, they returned to the demon kingdom. Sigmund said he was glad they had done well. Lifa told him that her parents really liked everything. MC said the main thing was that Lunora and the girls were unharmed. Lalana said that she didn't like it. Sigmund asked her what. She said she was Lalana. He should call her Lalana. Malula said he should call her Malula. MC agreed with them. After that, Lifa told Sigmund that she wanted to ask him something. Couldn't he prepare something to protect Malula and Lalana? It was very dangerous when guests like yesterday arrived, or when enemies sneaked up and attacked from behind. Lunora said she wished she had the strength to fight. MC said, well, they really couldn't put them in danger. Lifa asked him why he didn't prepare a servant. Sigmund asked, a servant? An image of a messenger appeared in his mind. Lifa said that even if he wasn't around, a demon messenger could protect everyone, and if he had pets, he wouldn't be so lonely. The girls, hearing this, simultaneously rejoiced and said, "Pet, the city of the demon kingdom." Lifa walked around the city and looked at the pets. She said bats, lizards, and also various beetles. Sibul told her that perhaps they had potential to become good helpers. Lifa said that for children, she would prefer something cuter. The salesman told them they were beautiful creatures. They had many customers who valued convenience. Lifa said the same was true for the average demon. The salesman asked, "How about that? They reproduce very well." Lifa thanked him, but declined. Sibul asked if they should look at other stores. Lifa agreed. She thought that she and Sibul had come here on MC's orders to look for messengers for Malula and Lalana. Lifa said that it was hard to find a suitable one in the human city. Just then, she noticed an alley. She called out to Sibul. He told her that they should look in the back streets. They walked down the alley. Lifa said that it looked like it was full of shady shops. Her grandfather said that they would hope for a good deal. As they passed a building, mice spotted them from the roof. As they got a little closer, the mice pounced on Sibul. However, before they could attack him, a white cat appeared and grabbed them. Then, looking at them, the cat turned around and walked on. Lifa called out to Sibul. He told her that this might be just what they needed. They should go get it. After following it, they saw it enter a shop. He asked, "Did it enter a shop?" After following this, they saw the girls say that it brought food again. After that, the girl turned to them and said, "Are these visitors?" Then she apologized to them for the noise. Lifa said that it was okay. Did something happen to her? The girl asked, "Did they hear everything?" After that, Lifa saw two cats who were sleeping. She said that they were very cute. The girl said that these were cat babies. Initially, it was a stray cat, but suddenly, it gave birth to offspring. But as they see, she is just a pharmacist in the backyard. She cannot look after them constantly, but she cannot leave them either. Sibul thought for a moment and then asked her if she could give them to them. After that, he explained the situation to her. The girl said that now she understood. Helpers for children. At that moment, the cat meowed. The girl looked at it and asked it, "Is it sure? Maybe that is why it brought them here." Lifa took the basket with the kittens. Sibul asked if they should know anything about it. The girls said they had cute noses. She asked them to take care of them. Sigmund said, "That's right, they should be grateful to the shop owner. The girls will definitely love the babies." As for Lunora was holding an owl in her hands. She said how adorable it was. She said that she prepared mini owl birds. Usually they are weak demons, but if they become servants and undergo training, they will become perfect helpers capable of protecting them. Lunora said that she will take good care of it. Lalana said that this cat is cute. Malula called the second cat Fluffy. Lifa said that she sees that they like it. Sibul said that they must be very happy. MC asked them if they have given them names yet. Lalana answered, "Well, since it is black, then let it be Blackie." Malula said her cat's name is Snowy. Lenora said she'd call it Belden. Sigmund said those were good names. He apologized to them for starting with that, but Lifa asked if they needed to level up. MC answered positively and said he'd go with them. Lifa asked him if he wanted to do everything on his own. Sigmund said he'd heal them in a jiffy if anything happened. Blackie and Snowy are ordinary cats. It's better for them to be on the safe side in case of an unforeseen event. Lifa said she and Blanc would go with him. MC thanked them for their help. Sigmund thought they'd first make a magical pact between master and servant. This would reflect their traits and make evolution easier. He asked them if they were ready. Lifa answered positively. MC thought he, Lifa, and Blanc would use their skills to attract predators, and then they'd immobilize them in a second. After that, they began attacking the monsters in the forest. Lifa said they were now linked. She told them they should attack it. Snowy approached the monster and hit it with its paw. After that, everyone else started attacking the monster as well. Lifa said she thought that was enough. After that, she cut the monster in half. Her actions shocked the pets. Lifa asked them what was going on. Sigmund said that perhaps their levels had risen very quickly, which was why they had grown physically. Lifa called MC. After that, MC brought out even more monsters. He said they were leveling up rapidly. Sigmund put on his glasses and said he needed to check their status. It seemed all three had transformed into dangerous creatures. Name, Blackie and Snowy. Race, Great Cat Assassins. Skill, Dark Magic, Wind Magic, Shadow Concealment, Shadow Movement, Concealment, Gigantism. Name, Bell. Race, Great Shadow Owl. Skill, Dark Magic, Wind Magic, Earth Magic, Stealth, Night Eyes, Shadow Concealment, Shadow Movement. Noir said they've evolved and take advantage of their small size. They're very intelligent. MC said they have a shadow hide, so they can hide in the shadows. They need to make sure Lunora and the girls are safe. To do that, they'll continue leveling up. The conference room of the Demon Kingdom. Demolis thanked them for their efforts and safe return. Rude thanked him and said they would have been in danger if his daughter hadn't come to the forest for them. Demolis asked them if they had met the Immortal King. He answered affirmatively and said his father had introduced him. Iglis asked what his name was. They exchanged glances and replied that the master of the land was called Sigmund. Abaddon asked, Sigmund? He hadn't heard that name before. Was he truly a higher vampire? He replied that he didn't know. Abaddon asked why not? If he were a vampire, it would be easy to tell by the color of his bloodshot eyes, wouldn't it? He replied that he didn't have bloodshot eyes like his father and daughter, that he had gray hair like most vampires, but his eyes were blue as the sky, and that he walked carefree in the sun and used light magic. He asked what that meant. Were vampires immune to light magic? Logia replied that his father-in-law and daughter weren't afraid of the light either, and that they had gained power and walked freely through the abyssal forest, so they believed that MC was even more powerful than a vampire of a higher species. Abaddon asked, a higher species? That couldn't be true. A vampire lord? Iglis said a vampire lord with a stronghold in the forest and immunity to sunlight and light magic. What kind of monster was that? Demolus asked if they were sure they weren't exaggerating when they called him immortal. How could they fight such an opponent? Iglis told him that wouldn't happen. The demon kingdom would be destroyed if it clashed with him. Abaddon agreed. They should seek coexistence, not enmity. Immortals have no intention of feuding, do they? Rude responded positively and said that both father and daughter had declared their willingness to lend a helping hand during the crisis in the demon kingdom. Abaddon then said that this meant they should treat them kindly. He said that was very good. He would compile a report to the demon lord accordingly. Abaddon then turned to Demolus and asked what measures he would take against the Holy Kingdom's spies. Demolus replied that he needn't worry about that. His subordinates were monitoring the spies with their messengers. A tavern on the outskirts of the demon kingdom. The boys were talking. Did they hear? The man said that the previous demon lord's steward and his granddaughter had disappeared. The boy asked how that was possible. He said that they were at war just recently. Unusual, isn't it? The old man was the last overlord's steward. He said he had abandoned the previous overlord in everything. He replied that this was amazing. He had heard this story too. Hadn't they said he had retired? He said there were rumors that he lived on the outer side of the abyss. He asked, Abyss? What was he talking about? The man replied that the northern outskirts were relatively safe. The other told them that they knew nothing. Apparently, the old man and his granddaughter had moved to the forest of the abyss. The guy asked, was he serious? The man said that it seemed their relatives were very worried. His son and his wife worked for the overlord, and they had recently been sent to the forest of the abyss. He said that they were probably still looking for them. He said he was sorry, but they would not get out of there alive. He replied in the negative and said that they had returned, both safe and sound. He asked, was he sure? The comrade replied that he had seen them return with his own eyes. The man said that if he was telling the truth, it was a big deal, meaning the demon kingdom could enter the abyss. He said they needed to gather more information. He asked him if he really thought so. The guy said they couldn't go to the abyss forest to find out everything. Could they? The man replied in the negative and said they would have to look for information in the demon kingdom. He said he had heard that the great tyrant Azra had appeared in the southern meadow. He said that in any case, His Majesty the Holy King was in a bad mood, since the territory wasn't his after all. If they brought back such information, they would indeed be sent to the abyss. They would first conduct a thorough investigation, and then report back. Sigmund's house. MC was stirring something in a bowl. Lifa asked him what he was making. Sigmund replied that it was ice cream, since it was getting hot right now. MC said that his blood relatives, Shabel and Lifa, were tolerant of both heat and cold, but Lunora and the children felt the heat even in clothes with attribute magic. He believed that children shouldn't experience such inconveniences. Sigmund asked her what kind of summer activities children had in the demon kingdom. Lifa replied that when she was little, they played in the river, but surrounded by forest. Both the river and the surrounding forest were dangerous places. MC thoughtfully said, water games, then they should build a pool. Lifa asked him what a pool was. Sigmund replied that it was an artificial pond where people could bathe, something like that. Lifa asked if it was a version of the outdoor cold water bath the master had mentioned. MC replied that it was something like that. He had a favor to ask her. He needs some things for playing in the water. He would like her to sew a swimsuit. Lifa happily answered yes and said anything he wants. Then she asked, what does a swimsuit mean? Sigmund said yes. He will tell you more now. An alchemical refrigerator. MC explained to her in detail what she asked. Lifa said that it means it is made of elastic, repulsive fabric. Ice cream. And now this. He is really amazing. Sigmund said that he would not say that. It's just that the place where he comes from is strange, although this world is even stranger to him. He asked her if she could do it. Lifa answered yes, and said that it was just her first time sewing something like this. She asked Blanc and Noir if they would help her. MC smiled and wished them luck. He said that in the meantime, he will build a pool. Sigmund used earth magic to make a depression in it. During the process, MC thought of a white stone from the forest, carefully placed so that the water wouldn't leak out. The pool wasn't very deep, so Malula and Lalana's feet could reach the bottom. He'd also put a few bumps on the sides to prevent slipping. The girls watched all of this. Sigmund thought that with the artifact, he'd create a system that would draw water from the channel and send it back to the same channel to circulate the water. The girls walked away from him, and she asked what he was doing. She replied that she didn't know. MC removed the shutter, and water poured out. Sigmund thought the pool was ready. He said they just had to wait for the costumes. They weren't ready to play yet. MC wondered what the deal was with the costumes. Lifa told her they needed to work on a swimsuit design. Lenora asked if Sigmund hadn't given them the material for the swimsuits. She responded positively and said, of course he did. But according to the master, a swimsuit should be tailored to the wearer's body shape and taste. So if they were going to sew suits, why not make them beautiful? She also wanted to make something beautiful for Malula and Lalana. Lunora responded positively and said that she understood. After talking, they started sewing. After a long time, Lifa said that everything was ready. Lunora, you too. She said that it was wonderful work and the pool was ready. She needed to tell MC that tomorrow they would wear swimsuits and play in the water. Lifa responded positively and thought that she was already starting to get nervous. Sigmund said, blue sky, white clouds, dazzling sunshine, it's the perfect day for swimming in the pool. The girls ran into the pool. She said that she felt cold and good at the same time. They splashed in the water and laughed joyfully. Noir told MC that she brought him a drink. Sigmund thanked her and took the glass. He thought, this is what a quiet life means. The girls called their mother. They grabbed her hand and said that they should play. Lunora agreed to their request. MC wondered if that bathing suit she was talking about was supposed to be like this. Maybe elves looked better in light clothing? It seemed he finally understood Pollux's concerns. It was probably best for him not to look at someone's wife, right? So he would do so. Then Lifa appeared in front of him and called him. She apologized to him for keeping him waiting. It took her a while to put on her bathing suit. Sigmund looked at her and said that she didn't have to worry about it. Lifa lay down next to him. MC asked her, is this the design? Lifa replied that she and Lunora came up with it together. Sigmund thought for a moment and then told her that it was very beautiful and suited her. Lifa blushed and thanked him. She ran up to her and said they should play. Lifa agreed and then told MC they should go together. She extended her hand to him and Sigmund reciprocated. Then they all played ball in the pool and had fun along the way. Lifa said she hadn't had this much fun playing in the water since she was a kid. The pool was so much fun. MC responded positively and said he hadn't had this much fun either. Sigmund thought that relaxing by the pool in the summer was the definition of a relaxed life. The next day, MC was working in the garden again. Sigmund picked something from a tree and tried it. He said it tasted like cucumber and that he needed to make a salad out of it today. Since he was a ghost, he missed out on delicious things, and he loved good food. MC thought he couldn't remember exactly what food tasted like back in his home world, but he was sure the ingredients in the forest here and the food Lifa cooked were delicious. The girls ran up to him and asked what he was doing there. Sigmund replied that he was picking vegetables. She raised her hand and said she wanted some too. She also raised her hand and said the same thing. MC smiled at them and said, okay, then he'll ask them to pick some tomatoes over there. They responded positively and said they would do anything. Sigmund praised them, saying they were so good. She held up a tomato and said that they were helping mom and dad. MC said he thought so. After a while, the girls picked a lot of tomatoes. Sigmund said, well, that's enough for storage. She happily handed him the tomatoes and said he should look here. Doesn't hers have the biggest ones? She also handed him tomatoes, saying she had bigger ones. MC sat down next to them and said they were both absolutely huge. Maybe they should make a salad out of them today? They both answered yes at the same time. Lifa greeted them. Sigmund told her that he was back. The girls ran to their mother and said they were home. Mom asked them if MC had been playing with them. She answered no. She said they had been helping him. Sigmund agreed with them and said they had worked hard. Today they were feasting on the vegetables they had picked. Lifa said with a smile that she would cook them soon. Lunora said that we would have the patience to wait for this. They should wait in the dining room for the meal to start. They agreed with her. Then, they all sat down at the table and wished each other bon appétit. Everyone sat and enjoyed the food they had prepared. Lifa said they had picked a lot of tomatoes. Blanc and Noir would make sauce. MC said that would be great. Sibyl asked him if he was working on something. Sigmund replied that he was actually thinking of expanding the outer part of the wall. He was trying to figure out how to make it happen. Right now, as soon as they leave the wall, they find themselves right in the forest, right? He thought that was why they were cramped. Sibyl replied that he understood everything, so he was going to expand the territory. Speaking of which, maybe he should start with the vineyard area? MC thought about it and thought, so that's what it is, right? And make more wine, that's what he wants, right? Not even refrigerators. Sigmund agreed with him and said that there will be more wine. He thanked him. MC said that he had a lot of work to do again tomorrow. The pastures south of the abyss, the Holy Kingdom camp. Something alarming is happening. The aide said he had a message. The bears roaming the steppe disappeared a few days ago. Scouts have discovered they've changed territory. The commander of the Holy Land Army's invasion force. The commander said that if that's the case, now is the time. He needs to continue surveillance. They'll invade before more demons settle there. The aide replied that he was listening. The commander said he'd report back to his homeland and inform His Majesty the Holy King. He said dreamily that if their troops occupy the plain, he wondered what reward His Holiness would assign him. Then he noticed a slave carrying a towel in a basket. He called her over and asked what she was doing there. He pushed her, causing her to fall. The slave, with tears in her eyes, answered him that she was changing her towel. The aide ran up to them and asked what had happened. The commander asked him if he was responsible for her. She was an eyesore. He should keep his slaves away from his tent. It was disgusting. The assistant bowed and apologized. The slave followed suit. He replied that it wasn't her fault. He would take care of the commander's tent, and she would take care of the others. The captain's dislike of other species was also troubling. Slavery itself was frowned upon by other nations, and he was in the pay of such a nation. What could he do? Then he noticed something, and thought that he rarely saw a raven here. Several months later, the assistant said he was pleased to report that there was no sign of bears here, and no other demons had come here either. The captain replied that that was excellent. Were the meat shields ready? He nervously replied that he shouldn't call them that. The captain, displeased, said that he shouldn't worry so much about the slave troops. Demons, elves, dwarves, and beastmen, they're vile creatures, unlike them, who have divine blood. They have human slaves among their ranks, but they're all criminals, so should they be put to good use? Or does he want to break military regulations and become a criminal slave? He replied in the negative. The captain replied that that was good, and thirdly, he didn't need to talk nonsense. And then he shouted to everyone that they needed to take position and begin preparing for the invasion. Meanwhile, the raven the aide had spotted months ago was watching all of this. Afterward, it landed on Sigmund's hand. MC told him it was good work. How did it go? Name: Yata. Race: Bloodstorm Raven. Yata replied that the boys from the Holy Land were making a noise. The master's trap had worked. They were alarmed by Azra's change in patrol routes and were planning to launch an invasion. Sigmund said it was so easy to fall for that. Yata said he was a poor judge of character. No one expected a beast-like demon to have a long-term strategy. Yata, the messenger demon, hired him to spy on the Holy Land based on the Demon Kingdom's intelligence. Yata thanked her for bringing him water. Previously, Yata had imitated human voices and misled them to attack their victims while they were under guard, and as often happens, this affected his character, transforming him into a talking crow. Yata asked, "So what's the plan? Does he intend to exterminate them?" MC replied, "Probably not." Noir told him that the master had no intention of going against humans. Yata asked her, "What?" The master was the ruler of the abyss, whose power was such that according to Lifa, he could rule all the surrounding countries. Sigmund reflected that he had recently realized that this was no exaggeration. Noir answered, "But the master's wish is to live peacefully. If people knew of their existence, they would be drawn into unpleasant disputes." Yata looked at MC and asked him, "But didn't he say he wanted to free the slaves?" Sigmund answered positively, and said that when they assigned him to watch over the Holy Land, it was originally Sibyl and Lifa's idea. He also didn't intend to give up the plains to the Holy Land. He wanted to expand his lands at the expense of the steppes, which is what Sibyl and Lifa were working on. MC told him that he should continue to watch over the Holy Land and report back to him. He answered positively and then flew away. He asked, "Free the slaves?" Sibyl answered positively and said that the non-human slaves the Holy Land had captured were prisoners of war or kidnapped from nearby regions. They would drive the people of the Holy Land from the plains and use this to rescue the captives. Sigmund asked, "Prisoners of war? They are exchanged between countries, aren't they?" He replied that the Holy Land disagreed. He swears he won't cause him any trouble. MC replied negatively and said he shouldn't worry. He'll provide any assistance so they can do whatever they want, but they need to make sure they don't get hurt, okay? Lifa and Sibyl bowed to him at the same time and agreed. Sigmund looked into the distance and said he needed to make more wine before they returned. The Demon Kingdom. Sibyl apologized for the late reception. Sibyl sets off for the Demon Kingdom. Demolus told him he'd heard Rude and Lagia's report. He welcomed him to the Demon Kingdom. Demolus apologized again for sending them into the forest to spy on them. Sibyl said he didn't mind. He was sure it had been a good experience for him and his son. Demolus said, "So he came all this way for a reason, right?" Sibyl answered affirmatively and asked if he knew the Holy Kingdom was targeting the steppe regions in the southern part of the continent. Demolus answered affirmatively and said that the Holy Kingdom's scouts had visited these steppes many times, but did they have proof that they were targeting them? Sibyl answered affirmatively and said that his master's envoy had confirmed everything. Apparently they were impatient. One side after another was making peace with the Demon Kingdom, and their own country was isolated, so they were ignoring the danger of the demons living in the forest. Judging by how they had behaved so far, it seemed that if the Holy Kingdom invaded the steppes, they would use their slaves as meat shields. This would be a good opportunity to free them. Demolus said that by saying this, he meant that MC would help him. Sibyl replied negatively, saying it was just his own opinion, as his son had probably told him. For him, the Demon Kingdom was still his homeland, and he couldn't leave his people captive, so he and his granddaughter, Lifa, would help him. Was that true? Demolus replied positively, saying that this was what they should do. He and Lifa would hide and keep an eye on the Holy Land. As soon as they made a move, they would inform his army, and as soon as there was a signal, they would cause a commotion. Demolus continued, saying that they would seize the opportunity. He replied positively, saying that was the issue. They would prepare scouts and medics. Could he send Lord Iglis's elite troops there, just in case? Demolus replied, the only question was, how would they get to the steppe? Sibyl replied that it would be best for them to cross the abyssal forest. Demolus asked him, but how was that possible? Sibyl laughed and said he didn't need to worry about that. He'd get him through the abyss safely. Demolus asked if that was true. He was counting on him. Then he'd negotiate with Iglis and Abaddon. Sibyl asked him to convey his regards to His Majesty. After that, he vanished. Demolus said, Well, gather soldiers, and Iglis and Abaddon could definitely handle that. Sigmund said it was herbs and spices from Sibyl and Lifa, as well as wood chips from the abyss. MC asked her what she thought he was doing. Blanc replied that she couldn't even imagine what he was planning. Sigmund replied that he was making smoked meats. She asked him, confused, smoked meats? MC said that, in simple terms, it's food seasoned with smoke. If you smolder the wood in a fire, the strong aroma preserves the food well and makes it delicious. She replied that she understood. But would these tools be needed for smoking? Sigmund answered positively, and said that today he was going to use this to smoke intestines. He asked who wanted to help him. The girls said yes. MC said that he didn't even know if it would be too difficult for them. They turned into cats and came up to him, as if pleading. Sigmund said that first they needed to make mincemeat, and this device would help them. They needed to put the meat in here and then turn the handle. She grabbed the handle and started turning it. She was very surprised that the meat began to turn into mincemeat. She ran up and said that she wanted it too. After that, she also grabbed the handle and started turning it. MC looked at them and said that they were great. They should work in turns. After they twisted it, Sigmund said that now they needed to mix the mincemeat with salt and herbs. MC showed them how to do it, and they copied him. Sigmund said that once the minced meat was thoroughly mixed, they needed to stuff it into the intestines. The girls imitated his every move. After that, she declared it was ready. MC said they were both very good at this. Now all they had to do was boil it for a bit, then spread it on and wait. While Sigmund waited, he sat and read a book, then noticed something. He saw Lunora approach the girls, who had fallen asleep. Sibyl called MC and said he had returned. Sigmund greeted him. MC asked him if it seemed the negotiations with the demon kingdom had been successful. Sibyl responded positively and said that everything was as planned. Lifa was checking the route from the demon kingdom to the steps, everything according to their agreements. She would return by nightfall. Sigmund replied that he understood. Then they should eat when Lifa returned. He had prepared stuffed intestines today. Maybe they should open some drinks? Sibyl lit up at the suggestion and agreed. MC said the children had helped him a lot too. Sibyl said that meant all the more reason to look forward to it. Sigmund was working in the garden again. He said they would have another big harvest this fall, expanding the vineyard since they were making wine for the second year in a row. Plant growth was accelerated by the golems' plant magic, but harvesting and processing the crops was a problem. They didn't have enough wooden golems. He couldn't make wine bottles on his own, and they couldn't invite glass artisans to the abyss forest. Well, he'd have to think about that later. He still had plenty of time. Lifa asked him, a barbecue? MC replied positively and said the harvest was over, and he needed to have a barbecue to celebrate. How did she like that idea? Lifa said she thought it was a great idea, and she'd prepare the meat and vegetables. Sigmund said he'd start the fire then. Lifa said they needed to slice the forest demon meat and season it, and they needed to cut the freshly picked vegetables into pieces. That should be enough for the meat. By the way, they also need to fry the mushrooms. Noir asked Lifa if she liked mushrooms, right? Lifa answered yes, and said that they are a favorite food of demons. All plants and animals taste better when they have a lot of magical power. Mushrooms are especially popular among demons because they grow in places with a lot of magical power and accumulate it well. And the mushrooms from this forest are simply incredible. Lifa told MC that the ingredients were ready. He thanked them all and said that they should call the others. Everyone looked at it with delight. The girls excitedly shouted that it was meat. Sigmund lit a fire and began frying the meat. She asked him if the meat was ready yet. MC told her that she needed to wait a little longer. If it was raw, it would upset her stomach. He took a piece of meat and told her that she should give him her plate. Lifa thanked him. She tried the mushroom and smiled very happily. She told him it was delicious, so nice to eat in nature. He said he couldn't argue with that. Everyone was enjoying the delicious food again. Sigmund thought he was glad they were enjoying it. Sibyl asked if it was a beautiful day, wasn't it? MC answered positively and said that the autumn leaves were also wonderful. The trees in the abyss forest were a mystery. He thought they were evergreen, but they ended up turning red. They probably changed because of the abundance of magic filling the space, although perhaps they were close to Ent. Ent is a tree demon. Sigmund said that's why the landscape is different every year. They enjoyed the delicious wine together. Sibyl said he had the impression that ale was a cheap drink, but this one, brewed by a master, was exceptional. MC smiled and said he was pleased to receive praise from a wine lover like him. Sibyl laughed and said that he hoped the demon kingdom would experience similarly peaceful times. Sigmund asked if the demon kingdom had just entered a war, correct? Sibyl responded affirmatively, saying that life was only just beginning to improve, but that there was still room for demon invasion, so it would be a while before they could all enjoy peaceful days. MC said he hoped everyone could live in peace. Sibyl told him he thought the current demon lord had nothing to worry about. Sigmund asked if he believed in him. Did he? Sibyl replied that he was a noble lord who had stood up for the people, and of course his loyalty was only to them. MC told him he was grateful for that too, as his life would be different without him. Sibyl was touched by these words and said, but if he's talking about the future, the Lord might have a hard time. The meat and vegetables from the abyss are of such high quality that even the highest demon clans can barely taste it. And if the children get used to such a taste, then they'll have to find a good place for them to live. Sigmund wondered in surprise, Would he really interfere with their families' lives? No, they should be healthy while under his protection. Nothing could be done, right? She called MC and said she had fried her part. They should eat together. Sigmund thanked her. He thought uncomfortably that it was difficult for him to change his diet, so it was inevitable that children would turn into gourmets. Suddenly, the pitfalls of a comfortable, measured life were revealed. The father of the family needed to hold on. Yata contacted MC and told him that the Holy Kingdom was on the move. Sigmund said it was good work, he needed to continue surveillance. MC turned to Sibyl and told him that the Holy Land had begun an invasion of the steppe. Sibyl replied that he understood and said they would proceed according to plan. Lifa called Sigmund and told him she would help them until the slaves were freed. They needed more magic to break the magical contract, right? She thought the slaves of the Holy Kingdom had a magical contract, similar to the master-slave contract she had with Sibyl. She told him that given his overwhelming magical power, they would be able to break the contract. That was encouraging. Sibyl said he would then go to the Demon Kingdom and notify them. Then he half-transformed into a spider and set off. The Demon Kingdom. Demolis noticed something and asked what it was. At that moment, he called Sibyl and asked him why he hadn't come in his normal form. Sibyl replied that it was urgent. Demolis asked him if Zerod was advancing. Sibyl nodded, expressing his affirmative. Demolis told him he was going to an audience with His Majesty right now. He would go with him. Sibyl agreed. Vandert said, so they made their move. Sibyl responded positively and said this was an opportunity to retrieve all the slaves. He said he would immediately send a rescue party. He told Iglis he knew what to do. Iglis responded positively and said they would send their best warriors to help. Abaddon asked if they had resolved the issue with the magical contract. Sibyl replied that his master would take action. Abaddon happily exclaimed, wow, personally, it made him feel even better. Sibyl said they should understand. His master would only help break the contract and would not take to the battlefield. Vandert said they didn't need that. If the Immortal King's powerful presence became known beyond the forest, he couldn't even imagine the recklessness the Holy Kingdom of Zerod would resort to. They needed to discuss the details of the operation with Iglis and the others, and then they would set out immediately. He said the Overlord was approaching matters with care. He had become more mature since becoming king. Iglis looked at him and asked why he didn't tell him in person. He was sure the Lord would be pleased to hear it from him. Sibyl wasn't the Demon King's subordinate now, but rather his friend. Sibyl told him the same could be said for him. At that moment, Iglis's assistant bowed to him and said they would soon arrive at the forest. He replied that he understood and asked, but are they really going to cross it? Sibyl said they only needed to pass along the edge of the forest. They would guide them. They didn't need to worry about that. Iglis asked again. They? He answered affirmatively and said they would help escort them. At that moment, they saw Ars and Kubinochi standing before them. Iglis bowed to them and asked, is that it? He had read about it in Lagia's report, but seeing it in person sent shivers down his spine. And the golem was also Shibul's servant. He answered affirmatively and said that it was true. They could cross the abyssal forest on their own. Iglis understood and would be grateful if they joined him. He then shouted to his assistants that they needed to move on. They responded in unison, affirmatively. They made their way deeper into the forest. He thought there were no signs of demons, but thanks to them, the demons seemed intelligent and were fleeing their encounter. At that moment, a monster attacked them from the bushes, but Arsa quickly dealt with it. Iglis said that even if the demons they encountered were incapable of thought, he hadn't expected them to be so easily repelled. Sibyl asked him to remain alert and keep an eye on them without leaving. He responded in the affirmative. Lifa approached MC and said that the Demon Lord's army would arrive soon. Sigmund replied that he understood everything. It meant they were also setting up camp in the meadow, as planned. They hadn't noticed them at all. Lifa told him he possessed first-class stealth skills, not to mention vision-related skills. While watching them, they were too far away for them to notice. Lifa said they were in position and needed to signal Sibyl that everything was ready. He answered affirmatively and then flew away. Iglis said he hadn't expected them to reach the meadow so soon. Sibyl saw Yata fly away and said the master had given them the signal. Are they ready? Iglis answered affirmatively. Sibyl said they should stick to the plan then. He turned to Arsa. It understood him and headed deep into the forest. The captain told it that he needed to start building a fort. What was the problem? The assistant asked if he felt anything. The captain said they hadn't seen a single demon or small animal since arriving in the steppe, and they should strengthen perimeter security. He answered affirmatively. At that moment, someone shouted that they were in trouble. It was Arsa's bear. The captain asked in horror, Azra? Hadn't it changed territory? It was heading straight for them. Azra finally meets the squad from the Holy Land. Then Azra stood up and roared loudly and then began to attack them. He ordered the slaves to form squads on the flanks. They mustn't let it get to the rear. She thought they were using them as a shield to escape. At that moment, all the animals began to run away, frightened by Azra. The captain shouted at them that they must stop. Their resources. The carts with their resources which they had loaded overturned. The captain looked ahead and saw Azra running towards them. Then, fearfully, he said, every man for himself. After these words, he began to run away. The moment Azra stood in front of the slaves, Lifa called out to it and thanked it for its efforts. That would be enough. The slaves asked in surprise, is it a demon? At that moment, MC, standing behind them, flew high into the air. For some reason, all the slaves fell to the floor. Lifa called out to him. After that, Sigmund extended his hand mid-flight and freed all the slaves from their shackles. A voice announced that they had successfully terminated the slave contract. Lifa agreed and said that was it. They would take them as soon as they met with Sibyl and the Demon Lord's army, but for now, they could gather. MC smiled and thought that they had truly been treated roughly. He thought that his main goal was here. Gathering and processing stones takes time and effort, and he was glad there were so many of them. Sigmund took all their resources. Lifa turned to the side and saw her grandfather arrive. Iglis ordered him to gather the human slaves over there, have the demons check them for criminal records and detain them. They should transfer the demons and other races to the carriages, and use the potion on the wounded, regardless of race. Sibyl said they would now set up camp on the outer edge of the forest, and head back to the demon kingdom tomorrow. Iglis responded affirmatively. MC thought the others seemed safe. The sacred land of Zerod. Bakal asked him fearfully, "Have they lost all the slaves?" The captain replied that with Azra's arrival, they had no choice but to abandon their supplies and flee. Rodin said their supplies were low, and the cost of an expedition to the steppes was monstrous. They wouldn't be able to send troops there for some time. Bakal, disappointed, said that the entire plan was to cultivate the steppes and turn them into farmland. Rodin thoughtfully remarked that their country depended on food imports from other countries. If the operation succeeded, they could reduce their expenses. Bakal, clutching his head, said that they were planning to attack other countries' agriculture after they had cultivated the land. He's an incompetent idiot. He'll be stripped of his status. The captain looked at him with fear and begged for forgiveness. Rodin left the room, thinking that, given their relations with neighboring countries, perhaps this was for the best. Sigmund stood there, very pleased, as he had acquired a lot of materials. He thought about how, when he prevented the Holy Land's invasion and freed the slaves, he had received a large quantity of various materials that the Holy Kingdom had brought with them. He wondered what he should build. He enjoyed the process of building, but he also enjoyed developing a plan. Sitting at the table, he enthusiastically said, yes, he needs to renovate the workshop to create more things. At that moment, a cat approached MC, after which it tried to get its attention. But realizing that nothing was working, it left. It approached her. She picked it up and asked how it went. Sigmund still couldn't play with them. Lenora told them not to disturb him. MC was busy making something again. The girls approached him and asked what he was doing today. Sigmund told them he was renovating the workshop. She extended her hands to him and said he should play with them. Lenora told Lalana that she shouldn't disturb him. They were upset and agreed with her. Lenora looked at them worriedly. MC thought for a moment and told them they should wait another day, okay? He'd make them something to play with. Lenora asked him if he was sure about that. Sigmund answered positively, saying that children really do get bored sometimes. She thanked him and said they would behave well and wait. The girls happily agreed with her. After that, they left, and MC waved at them. Then, he took out a piece of paper and said that now he needed to think about what would be more interesting to play on. A slide would be suitable for their age, preferably an iron one, and he should also add some rocks. He drew a sketch on paper and said he'd make it round, without any curves, and position it so it could be seen from the window. Then, looking at the sketch, he began building the slide. Once everything was ready, he said it was excellent, and by the way, it would be nice to make a swing. Sigmund took an ordinary log, then turned it into wooden planks, and then painted them. Holding a chain and rope in his hands, he asked which he should use, the chain or the rope. He decided to test their strength and said the demon rope was stronger, so he'd use that. After that, he continued building. He used earth magic and said he needed to do it like this. Then he tied the rope to the fastenings on both sides and tested the swing to make sure it worked. He said that next he needed a fence and a sandbox. For the sandbox, he would dig a deep hole and surround it with a wooden frame and then fill it with gravel and sand. He thought he had done a pretty good job. The next morning, he brought the girls to see it. Lenora was also very surprised by it. The girls exclaimed happily and with delight. Lenora thanked MC and told him that the playground was wonderful. Sigmund awkwardly said that it was a pleasure making it. He liked that everyone liked it. The girls used all the new things MC had recently built for them. Meanwhile, Sigmund was sitting under a tree, reading something again. Then he looked to the side and saw Lifa and Sibyl. Lifa told him that they had returned. MC welcomed them back and asked if they were injured. Were they? They answered, in the affirmative. Sigmund asked them if the inhabitants of the Demon Kingdom were all right. Sibyl replied that Azra and the golem had escorted them. Lifa said that thanks to Azra, they hadn't had to fight, and the people they rescued weren't seriously hurt either. Of the 500 people they protected, 70% were demons, and the rest were humans. The people kidnapped from Western countries and enslaved in the Holy Land were temporarily under the protection of the Demon Kingdom. MC asked how they could enslave people of their own race and use them as human shields. He said it seemed that in the kingdom's Holy Land, certain nobles, proclaiming themselves descendants of God, were oppressing other peoples. Many of the demon tribes were like that, while they were held captive by the Holy Kingdom. Sigmund thought for a moment, then said that some demon clans were still imprisoned in the Holy Land, right? Sibyl replied that this seemed to be the case. MC said that they could continue to assist and cooperate with the Demon Kingdom to save the tribes. Sibyl thanked him. Sigmund said he knew their family was waiting for them in the Demon Kingdom, so he thought they should see each other more often. They answered that he was right. Western countries, border of the kingdom of Oifes, Botox Street. Brau asked him if he was about the request. Folk answered positively and said it seemed to be about wolf extermination. She said she would check the request report. She handed him a bag and said that here was his payment. Since he arrived, requests for tree frog extermination had been fulfilled without a problem. He replied that he wasn't as good as she said. She sincerely told him that he was lying. He had earned a good reputation among clients thanks to his skills. Elven magic is incomparable to human magic, and he knows how to use a sword and a bow. Folk thought that even though he had raised his level on his own, but mainly thanks to the equipment created by MC, he didn't need to become conceited. Besides, his magical power was nothing compared to his own. He looked at her and said that there were beings of infinitely high levels in this world. After that, he sat down at the table to have a drink. Mielke called Folk and said, "Here he is." Folk called them over and asked if the others were returning their quests as well. Serena answered positively and asked if they could sit next to her. Merle asked if she could sit next to him too. Mielke said she was late as always. Merle told him he should teach her more magic. Folk replied that she was full of enthusiasm and drive, a rising star in the guild. Serena said that she had talked about inviting him to their group. Would he be interested? He answered positively and said that he would like to join the group soon and take on larger orders, but their group was only for girls, wasn't it? Mielke replied that everyone else simply looked down on them. They worked near an abyss teeming with demons, so there were plenty of people willing to help. When many people gathered, the problems became even greater. They looked down on them because they were girls, or approached them to cause trouble. Serena said Folk was completely different. He replied that they were simply like daughters to him. Mielke said, "I see that elven view of longevity." Merle said that, besides, they needed another person in the vanguard for the fight. She added that even alone there, things were already very difficult. Folk told Mielke that she was a light fighter and used her speed to its fullest. She said that's why she wasn't very good at defense. He thought for a moment and realized that the girls were good fighters, but the expedition could be dangerous without another person in the vanguard. They weren't quite like him without the protection of their daughters, so they were capable of handling things on their own. But could he really call himself the father of his daughters if he didn't help him? He then answered them affirmatively and said they could count on him. Serena happily asked, "Is that true?" Merle said they would now advance to a higher rank. They raised their mugs, and she declared that their first step to fame was as adventurers renowned throughout the kingdom. They needed to celebrate the entrance of Folk, Abyssal Forest. Sigmund sighed wearily. The butler asked him what was wrong with him. MC told him he'd joined a girl group. Sable told him that strong men were popular with the ladies, especially those from the master equipment group. Sigmund responded affirmatively and said he thought just like a demon. The butler replied that he was joking, of course, but as an adventurer, he had made the right choice in joining the group. MC agreed and said he just didn't know why he had joined them. Sibyl asked him if he was jealous. Sigmund replied negatively, then said just a little. Leafa's expression sank. Sibyl told him not to worry about it. It was normal for a powerful man like him to have many wives. It was even practiced in the demon kingdom. He then looked at Leafa. MC laughed and asked, "But who would marry him in the middle of the forest? They shouldn't talk about it." He thought they shouldn't tell his wife and daughters about him just yet. He agreed and said they'd better pay close attention to what was going on. Sigmund was reading a letter. The butler approached him and asked, "Is this from Folk?" MC responded positively and said he wanted him to craft equipment for the girls in his group. Was he being overconfident or relying too much on him? He replied that he thought it was both. Sigmund said his wife was right there, and he was asking for such a favor, but he was sure he had no ulterior motives, so he was at ease. Sibyl said the stat discrepancy between him, who was wearing the master's equipment, and the rest of the team had widened, perhaps causing a cooperation issue. MC agreed and said that for his own safety, he shouldn't give up his equipment. He then began to flex his arms and asked, "For 3, right?" Sibyl replied, "A priest's robe, a mage's robe, a suit of light armor, and boots, and a weapon, if possible." He handed him a list. Sigmund said the wizard's staff should have a magic carrier, but they wouldn't make armor and boots without measurements. Sibyl asked him why they couldn't borrow clothes that would adjust themselves like the one he'd received. MC said that seemed like the only way to go. He'd have to ask Leafa to help them make the fabric. He wondered if she'd agree. He replied that he didn't know. At that moment, Folk had set up camp and was busy with his weapons. Yada flew up to him and called out to him. He said he was Sigmund's messenger, bringing a set of equipment for his comrades. Folk thanked him and asked, "Where are they?" Yada then tossed a bracelet into his hands and said it was the master's personal magical bag. Folk said it was a very valuable item. Yada said he should be careful not to lose it. Merle peeked out of the tent and asked him what was going on. What a cute little messenger. Folk apologized for waking them and said he'd told them once that he'd asked his benefactor for armor for them, and now it's been delivered. The girls began trying on what was delivered to them. She said it was amazing equipment. Mielke asked if his benefactor was a famous craftsman, right? "It's so light and has powerful defense. It's wonderful." Merle said it fit her perfectly. What useful magic. She wondered if she could use it if she learned it. Serena said she seemed to like it. They thanked him. Folk said they should put it to good use. She asked him if he could pass on her thanks. Yata asked if he wanted to pass on anything else. Folk replied negatively and said he hoped they were doing well and would contact them when he felt he was worthy of them. MC was building something again, hammering a nail. He figured what they were building today was a chicken coop. He asked, aren't eggs too expensive compared to other products? Isn't it possible to contact poultry farms directly? Lifa asked. Poultry farms? Sigmund asked. Don't they have any? Lifa said eggs usually come from wild chickens. That's one of the jobs for switchfinders. MC asked, isn't that too much trouble? Lifa responded positively and said that was the reason for the set price. Furthermore, keeping a large number of animals was dangerous because it attracted predators. In the case of chickens, these would be snakes, weasels, and monsters with a similar system. Sigmund asked, so, do monsters come here too? Lifa replied, but for complete economic independence, nomadic livestock farming is possible. MC replied that it was dangerous to keep large numbers of animals in one place. Lifa, however, said that in his case, it was entirely possible to keep them on the mansion grounds. The next time her grandfather went to the Demon Kingdom, she would ask him to look for them. Sigmund responded positively and thanked her. He thought that no matter how much money he had, it wasn't endless. Since he had no income, he had to be as self-sufficient as possible. And then he announced that the chicken coop was ready. MC stood there satisfied and said that if eggs could be produced reliably, the range would expand. Suddenly, Sigmund felt a little scared and realized he hadn't thought they were so huge. They were almost as tall as Malula and Lalana, about 1 meter. The girls were standing behind the fence, and she commented on how huge the chickens were. MC asked if they were really normal chickens. Lifa answered yes and asked if something was wrong. Sigmund answered no and said everything was fine. Lalana said they were so big. MC agreed with her and said they were simply huge. He asked if chickens could be trained. It would be bad if they pecked Malula and Lalana to death. Yata said that the master was underestimating the bird's own abilities. They should see. These guys were clearly frightened by the magical power emanating from him. They wouldn't do anything to spoil his mood. It was bad. He felt uneasy when he saw those big beaks and claws, but oh well. Sigmund turned to the chickens and asked if they understood what he was talking about. If they harm his family, he will not forgive them. They should remember this. After this, his cats approached MC. Sigmund picked them up and told them that they said they would protect Malula and Lalana. He laughed and said that they could be relied upon. Then he would ask them. MC turned to Tom, Oliver, and Jack and said that he entrusted them with the care of the chicken coop. They provide them with comfortable housing and food, in exchange for which they receive eggs from them. Okay, great. Then they should wait until he adjusts the size of the chicken coop a little. After this, they had a fried egg for dinner. Sigmund happily said that a dinner table with so many egg dishes on it was wonderful. The girls were very pleased and said that it was very tasty. MC said that since that was the case, now he wanted his own milk and dairy products. He asked her if there were any dairy cows for sale here. Lifa replied that not many, but there were some. Lenora said that cheese and butter, for example, were also sold by nomads from Western countries. Lifa said yes, her family led a nomadic lifestyle. She answered positively and said they had sheep and mountain goats, but cows are large, so they didn't need to keep them. Sigmund asked, big, right? Could he ask for reference? How big were they? She replied, about 4 meters. MC thought they were huge, already the size of a rhinoceros. He said that if they were that big, it would be dangerous for an ordinary farmer to keep them. The butler said that Kugunochi and Tom could handle them with their hands. They just needed to decide on the type. He recommended a demonic milk bull. He asked, demonic? The butler replied that a normal cow couldn't be milked unless she'd given birth, but a female milk buffalo could be milked year-round without much effort, and even royalty and aristocrats considered the milk delicious. Sigmund said that was wonderful. Right, they'd settle on a milk buffalo, then he'd have to find a way to get it. The butler said he should leave it to him. MC said he'd prepare the environment for now. He asked Lenora if he could get her advice. She responded positively and said whatever he wanted. Sigmund stretched and said that if he didn't increase the number of wooden golems to manage the barns, he'd be busy again. Holy Kingdom of Zerad. He approached Roden and said that a report on the losses they suffered as a result of that expedition was collected here. Roden reviewed the report and declared it appalling, which was why he had repeatedly advised them not to march their army into the territory of the great bear tyrant Asra. It was impossible to conclude that a monster that had lived for hundreds of years had changed territory just because it hadn't shown up for several months. The aide replied that they had lost provisions, livestock, and horses, but the greatest loss was among the slaves. They had been almost completely wiped out. At that moment, he entered and said he had come on his orders. At that moment, Zimran sharply remarked that acquiring new demon slaves was difficult. Prime Minister Zimran asked Roden if there was any way to deal with the great bear tyrant Arsa. Roden replied that it wasn't something humans could resist. He asked if magical artifacts could be used to eliminate the monsters. Roden replied that magical elimination only applied to D-rank monsters. For the SS-ranked bear tyrant Azra, that wouldn't be enough. Zimran asked with displeasure. The field nomads are scurrying back and forth, right? What if they sent a small group of troops? He replied that they might just manage to get through, but if they were attacked while building the base, they wouldn't survive. Medes interrupted him and asked if the problem was that it couldn't be subjugated by a knightly order in the first place. Roden replied that SS-ranked demons were formidable enemies, ones that even the former demon king couldn't withstand, and he wasn't about to send his subordinates to their deaths. Bakal, after listening to them, thought for a moment, and then said that he needed to do this. He should calm down too. They apologized. Bakal said that the issue they needed to discuss today was the nobles who had invested in this expedition and how to appease them. The nobles had originally decided to invest in acquiring pasture rights. This was a big deal, and they were making a fuss to open up the state treasury. Zimran told him that influential nobles were stirring up trouble to overthrow him. How about permanently stripping them of their power? Bakal said he meant to use this as an opportunity to put pressure on influential aristocrats. But wouldn't that only breed further discontent? He replied that this event was like a natural disaster, because no one could have predicted it. The Prime Minister said they needed to reject the idea that His Majesty's decision was flawed. Bakal laughed and agreed, then said they needed to provide assistance only to nobles who couldn't pay their debts. He said he couldn't believe they were stumbling over such things. The road to unifying the continent had proven long. Rodan told him that consolidating their position in the steppe zone would be difficult. This time he made it clear that even if they could defeat this monster, another would come. They needed to try a different strategy. He said that they need to focus on domestic policy for a while. He complimented his words and said that they also need to rebuild national resources. Maluna and Lalana were sledding down a snowy mountain. Their joy and delight knew no bounds. Lenora caught Lalana and told her to tie her scarf properly to keep warm. The girl agreed, adjusted it with her help, and then invited Maluna to go for another ride. They asked the protagonist's permission to go again, and he laughingly agreed. Lenora reminded the girls that they had classes starting in the afternoon. The girls chorused that they understood. The mother of the family looked at them with a smile and tenderness. MC thought, the girls are growing up quickly. They are learning reading and writing from him and Lifa, and magic from Lenora. He said that as a reward, he made them a sleigh and a snowy mountain. Lifa remarked, they're great. After a while, she called the children to lunch. The girls happily answered her call. Over lunch, Lenora asked the protagonist if Mr. Sabul had gone to the Demon Kingdom again today. MC replied that he had. He was gradually rescuing the remaining slaves in the Holy Kingdom. Malula, biting into a cookie, exclaimed that it was delicious. The protagonist said he used sugar obtained from the Demon Kingdom. Lenora, tasting the cookie, said in surprise, sugar? A top-quality seasoning. It gives food such a sweet taste. The protagonist added that they had also obtained sugar beet seeds, so if he succeeded in cultivating them, they could grow their own. However, he still bought most of the seasoning. He would like to be independent, if possible. Although they have been growing their own olives for a long time now, the olive oil produced by the master is of the highest quality, but he would like oil that can be obtained more easily. Lifa suggested, why not use oil trees? The protagonist repeated in surprise, oil trees. The girl explained that these were trees that bore fruit rich in oil. They could probably also grow on their own in the abyssal forest. Sigmund, perplexed, said he'd never noticed them. He didn't even know such useful trees existed. It would have been easier if they had existed in his past life. Before, he'd eaten the lard that dropped after killing monsters. But if he needed to take care of Lunor and the girl's health, vegetable oil was much better. Having found the right trees, MC plucked several fruits, brought them home, and decided to extract the unrefined oil from them using alchemy. He removed the impurities using purification magic. Afterwards, the protagonist looked at the resulting product and declared, excellent. After a while, he began cooking. Sigmund seasoned the demon chicken meat with sake, salt, and pepper, sprinkled it with flour he prepared, and potato starch. Afterwards, he tossed the meat into the boiling oil. A pleasant aroma emanated from the dish as it cooked. Finally, he placed the meat in the dish and declared, the deep-fried chicken is ready. Let everyone try it. Lifa and her maids followed his advice and were delighted. It was delicious. The protagonist smiled and declared, that's good. At that moment, the girls popped into the kitchen. He showed them the meat and said that there was a portion for them too. Malula and Lalana ate it with delight, saying it was crispy and delicious. Lifa said with interest, deep frying is a very interesting cooking method. It didn't exist in the Demon Kingdom. The protagonist replied, surprised that they hadn't told him about the oil tree, but that was probably because they had never deep-fried food before. The protagonist promised the girl that next time he would teach her many more. After all, if she knew even the basics, she could cook food much tastier than he could. Lifa assured him that she would definitely live up to his expectations. After some thought, MC asked her if there was soy in there. The girl, surprised, asked him, aren't those a type of beans? They're grown for livestock feed. She prepared several varieties for feeding chickens and dairy cows. The protagonist went to the barn, examined the contents of the supply bags, and exclaimed, this looks like something we could use. Perplexed, Leifa asked him what he'd use them for. He told her he wanted to try making the seasonings they used in his homeland. This usually requires a lot of time and effort, but now he could use magic to simplify this arduous process. The protagonist set to work, chanting every move for Leifa. You need to boil the beans in plenty of water. Then, mix them with salt, and usually add yeast. But using the rotting skill from dark magic, he could achieve fermentation. When the whole mixture began to bubble vigorously, Sigmund remarked with puzzlement that he seemed to have overdone it. After tasting the concoction, he added that the amount of salt still needed to be adjusted. After some time, having carried out several more fermentation manipulations, he declared, "It worked." Lifa looked at the resulting mixture in surprise and asked him, "What is it?" MC replied, "It's miso. It's dissolved in hot water, stirring constantly, and after mixing with ingredients is used for frying and stewing." When he prepared another dish from it, Lifa, having tasted it, admiringly declared, "It's mild, yet amazing. It's simply delicious." Sigmund exclaimed, "Good. It would also be great if you could make soy sauce. But that's still to come. There will be a lot of trial and error." He looked at the quiet Lifa and asked her what she was thinking about. The girl answered that it was the taste of his homeland. It could be used in many dishes. Let him leave that to her. She would show him how to perfectly use miso. The protagonist thought with interest. It seemed he had ignited something in her. Was it devotion ignited in Leaf's soul or something else? In the end, they successfully mastered the preparation of miso. The protagonist told Leaf he wanted to go to the steppe, specifically to the sea beyond the steppe, to fish. The girl offered to accompany him. He objected, telling her that it was a winter sea, so it would be better for him to go alone. She exclaimed, "Has he forgotten?" As a blood relative of her master, she also acquired frost resistance. The protagonist said doubtfully, "Of course it was," but she persuaded him. They would go together. Their journey was joyful. When Lifa grew tired and began tripping over branches lying in the road, the protagonist activated the boost, and they both continued their journey through the air. Then they descended to the ground again, climbed several slopes, and finally reached their destination. Lifa inhaled the air and exclaimed delightedly, "It smells like seawater." MC remarked he'd been waiting for this. He needed to get some salt. Lifa, looking at the small crystals, asked him, "Isn't that sea salt? It must be different from rock salt." Sigmund replied that in the demon kingdom, rock salt was primarily used. It had a different taste. There were dishes that paired well with rock salt, and dishes that paired well with sea salt. First, he would try to obtain that. The protagonist activated water magic. Manipulating the water with water magic, he separated out the impurities, and with fire magic, he evaporated the water. The final touch was disinfection, using light magic purification skills. He noticed he should have purified it at the very beginning. When the finished product was ready, Lifa said in surprise, "This is sea salt." Was he already thinking about how to combine it with food? After a while, the girl turned to him in amazement and asked, "Do they really need that much salt?" The protagonist became embarrassed and began to justify himself to her, saying he'd done it by accident. He decided to dive into the sea. Lifa asked in bewilderment, "Is it even safe for him to be underwater?" The MC assured her that he'd be fine even underwater. In fact, she could go with him too. What would she do? The girl resolutely replied that she would go with him. He extended his hand and told her to stay close. Lifa pressed herself against him and asked, "Is that so?" The protagonist became embarrassed and said that he didn't need to get that close. He hoped it would be fun. When the allies entered the icy sea, the protagonist created a barrier for them. The girl asked him if he was creating an air shell. Sigmund told her she was right. This way, they would be able to breathe underwater and stay dry. Descending to the seabed, the protagonist saw seaweed and exclaimed that it looked like kelp. It seemed like they could use it too. Lifa asked him if this seaweed was one of his targets. He told her that when they are cooked, they turn into dashi broth. He would take some home and test it out. What else could they get? Suddenly, the allies saw fish swimming past. Sigmund remarked that catching them with bare hands would be difficult. The girl asked him if he was using magic. The protagonist said no, he wanted to try something. So they needed to gather some more seaweed and return to the mansion. After a while, he gathered all his allies and they went fishing. Using magic, the protagonist cast the net into the sea, and the allies, including the girls, began to pull it in together. In no time, with joy and laughter, they pulled the net in. Malula and Lalana exclaimed in delight, "It's so cool! There are so many fish!" The net was simply filled with the catch. The protagonist asked his comrades to sort all the fish while he dealt with the monsters that had flocked to their catch. While he dealt with the enemies, Lifa told everyone she would sort the dangerous fish. Could Lunora and everyone else prepare everything for the barbecue? The mother of the family agreed and asked her daughters if they would help her. The girls happily and unanimously answered yes. Everyone got down to business. After a while, Lifa exclaimed, "Well done." The protagonist praised them. They'd all worked hard. Now it was time to eat. The allies eagerly began to eat. The girls admired the dish's flavor. MC said it was baked fish with salt, perfect for freshly caught fish. Lifa laughed and told him, watching the girls devour the fish, that he'd made the right decision. After a while, everyone returned home, which the girls loudly announced to the butler. Sibyl congratulated them on their return. The protagonist greeted him back and said he too had worked hard. He asked the old man how things were with the demon kingdom. Sibyl told his master that he had managed to save all of his compatriots who had been enslaved in the Holy Kingdom. The butler recounted his conversation with Vandert. He told him that while there remained tasks such as the mental and physical care of the demons, as well as their future lives, they would somehow manage that. Demolus added that the issues regarding non-demon slaves were also gradually progressing. Sable told the Demon King that he had already taken care of most of the things he could help with. He was returning to his master. Bandert thanked the old man again for his assistance, and added that they would discuss the reward later. Sable bowed to him and replied with dignity to the king that, for him, the Demon Kingdom was his homeland, and for his master, a good neighbor. They wished to maintain friendly relations with them. As he was leaving, he heard the king say, "He hasn't changed." Demolis noted the tense atmosphere. MC, having listened carefully, remarked, "I see. Perhaps the negotiations were difficult? Let him rest well." Sigmund assured him he would do so. The protagonist added, "For now, I'll take care of the fish." He decided to use some of the fish for cooking, some for making tuna flakes. The rest would be dried, and the small fish could be used as fertilizer. Sigmund stored the fish for cooking in the shadow storage and preservation chamber, then began the preliminary processing. He asked Blanc and Noir for help. The assistants told him to leave it to them. They would remember everything down to the smallest detail. The protagonist began demonstrating the method for preparing fish for flakes. First, he cut off the fish's head and divided the carcass into 3 parts. Then he removed the fins and head, the internal organs, cut the fish along the spine, cut off the other side as well, and pulled out the spine. Noir and Blanc watched him carefully. He added that it needed to be cut again. Could they do it that way? They'll be using the bones and cut parts later too, so let's leave that aside. The assistants began processing, and MC said, "Something like that, I guess." He hoped they wouldn't fall apart. Noir and Blanc asked him if they needed to be boiled in hot water. Sigmund told them that was true. He heard that doing so would make the meat more elastic, but he wasn't a professional, so he didn't know the details. Although his past life remained hazy to him, such wondrous knowledge remained with him, and he would regulate the temperature, fine-tuning the parameters with evaluation points. He decided that from now on, they would begin using magic. By manipulating the water, he removed the moisture. Based on his experience making miso, the steeping process could be replaced with magic. Noir asked him in surprise if this was really edible. The protagonist replied, "It doesn't really look like food, does it? It needs to be processed into fine shavings first. Let them try adding it to miso soup." When the assistants did so, Blanc exclaimed, "It's delicious." Noir remarked, "It adds a new flavor." The protagonist said, "If you improve it, it will be even more delicious." Miso soup with tuna flakes. Now he wanted rice. The assistants were surprised. "Rice?" Sigmund said. Yes, in his homeland, rice was a staple food. Therefore, there were many dishes consisting of rice with various additives. Noir remarked, "It seems rice is grown in the southern part of the Western Union." The protagonist thought, in the southern part? Maybe he should try buying some? At that moment, Sable called out to him. The butler apologized to him for interrupting him, but the milk buffaloes had arrived. When MC saw them, he was very surprised by their large size. After petting them, he added, "They're so calm." Sable remarked, "They probably sense his strength. These are very intelligent monsters who obey the strongest. He believes they will be easy to look after." The protagonist mused, "They obey the strongest, yes? Then he should make a blood pact for the safety of Milul and Lalan." After making a pact with the buffalo, he turned to the golems Henry and Ben and entrusted them with the care of the buffalo. The golems replied that he should leave it to them. The protagonist thought with a smile, "He's made it so these two can speak." MC inspected the pen for the acquired animals with a business-like air and noted that the barns seemed to be the right size for them. It must have been difficult to get here. He also prepared a washing area, so they would wash them one by one. The allies began washing the buffalo. Sigmund said that if it was just necessary to remove dirt, cleansing magic would do, but actual washing and brushing is a completely different experience. Ben remarked that the buffalo seemed to enjoy it. MC, tending to another buffalo, looked at the milking organ and said, "Indeed, it's possible to milk without having calves." He asked Sebel if they would need to express the milk every day. The butler told him that in ordinary cows, the accumulation of old milk can cause illness. But a dairy buffalo is a magical animal. Its physiology prevents milk from aging. He always says that the physiology of monsters is truly a mystery. He asked the protagonist what dairy products he plans to produce. The protagonist replied, "Cheese first." He plans to build a private workshop. Siebel asked him where he would get rennet for curdling. MC told him that the natural enzyme is found in the calves' stomachs. He doesn't intend to harm them. The butler said in surprise, "Really?" Sigmund added that if he entrusted the production to Henry and Ben, he wouldn't be able to use corruption magic. He needed to prepare an alternative plan. After some time, Sibus, reviewing his reports, said that given the total number of compatriots captured, the number actually saved was quite small. It seemed those 10 years had been wasted. Lifa said that for demons, 10 years wasn't a long time, but for those waiting for their return, it was a very long time. Demolis said that disregarding military agreements between countries, refusing to return prisoners of war, and using them as slaves, the previous demon king would have retaliated by slaughtering them. He turned to Vandert, but the king said he didn't want to do anything that would lead to a resurgence of war, for the sake of the demon population too. He then turned to Siebel and suggested they discuss a reward for the return of the prisoners. When the old man voiced his request for a reward, Vandert asked him in surprise, would that really be enough? The butler had asked for spice seedlings, grain seeds, and a milk buffalo as compensation. The demon king was surprised. Not money, not even land. Siebel calmly replied that he had already retired and didn't need money. Lafa replied that she didn't need anything either. What her grandfather had asked for was a worthy reward. Vandert, however, was dubious. The old man smiled and said, then he'll owe him. The demon king chuckled and replied that it was terrifying to be indebted to him. Siebel continued, he, his majesty, also mentioned the need for continued support for those held captive. The Demon Kingdom was trying to rebuild its lands and industries after the war. The food situation was finally recovering. He also knows that His Majesty is paying for it out of his own pocket. Even if he says the king will owe him, it's unlikely that Lord Sigmund will make such a reckless request. Vandert noted that he wished he could say otherwise. After a while, the girls and their mother went off to practice their hunting skills. Lallana shot a magical raccoon and joyfully exclaimed she'd succeeded. Lunora told her daughters to remain vigilant. Malula heard a rustling sound and, raising her bow, shot a large mouse that appeared on the horizon. Her mother praised her. She'd done well. Suddenly, a sound was heard behind Lallana again. Blackie rushed at the enemy with lightning speed, destroying it almost instantly. The girl, realizing what had happened, tearfully thanked her savior. The protagonist, watching this unfold, exhaled loudly. Sebel noticed they had both noticeably improved their skills. As expected, elven magic requires precision, and it's not even just the magic arrows. One day, Lady Lunora and the others will be able to evolve too. The protagonist asked him if when an elf evolves, they become a high elf. The butler answered that it was. MC clarified, but evolution doesn't usually happen, right? Sebel said, yes, it's a miracle that evolution happens, even if it takes a lifetime. The reason he and Lifa evolved is because they became his vassals. Sigmund, looking at Lunora and her daughters, said, yes, he wants the three of them to remain as safe as possible. They need to wait a little, and they'll see everything. Once transformed, it's impossible to return to your previous state. Appearance and lifespan can also change. Surprised by his knowledge, Sebel confirmed that this was true. Sigmund thought, he used to enjoy constantly leveling up his powers in the dungeon, so he had no idea the requirements for transformation were so high, or rather, this abyssal cave itself is a place ordinary demons can't approach. He added out loud, in other words, he, who had increased his level even further after defeating the dungeon, knew what he was talking about. But they shouldn't think about that. The butler looked at him, puzzled. MC said, in any case, if the girls can adapt to this forest, they won't have to worry about their powers anywhere they go. The old man answered, that's right. At that moment, Malula called out to the protagonist, showed him a rabbit, and joyfully exclaimed, let him see this. She caught it. Lallana added, her arrow hit it too. It was a carnivorous hell rabbit. The protagonist ruffled their hair and praised them. They had both shot a very large rabbit. Sebel thought in surprise. The hellish rabbit got its name because encountering it meant death, but in the case of his master, his questions about common sense would be misplaced. MC remarked that they would cook dinner tonight from the meat of their kill. The girls happily accepted his offer. The butler said he looked forward to them both becoming great and powerful elves. Sigmund told him he thought like a demon. The old man said that animals and monsters appear from somewhere in this forest, and he was glad there was no shortage of prey. The protagonist said he, too, had suddenly appeared here. At that moment, Kian thought, a huge forest stretching from the center of the continent to the northeast. This place is a place that the inhabitants of the continent tremble before. No one should set foot there. It is called the Forest of the Abyss. At the center of the forest lies the Labyrinth of the Abyss. This was a seal created hundreds of thousands of years ago by the hated creator god to imprison him. How he hated it. He was not content with merely incarnating such a weak body. To be trapped in a labyrinth was terrifying, but his plan was no longer effective. He didn't know what had happened, but the labyrinth had disappeared, and now he was free. He would emerge to the surface of the earth and take revenge on the creator god. Kian lamented once again. Was the body such an inconvenient thing? In his original form, he could have reached the surface in a single breath, but he had endured this for hundreds of thousands of years to this point. Making his way to the exit, he continued, the ruins of this world will disappear. When he regains his strength and rules the Earth's surface, he will take what is his. Finally reaching the exit, Kian poked his head out, looked around, and emerged completely. He jumped with joy and exclaimed, let the creator god tremble. Let him see, he has descended to Earth. At that moment, Kian heard a sound and saw a monster appear. He gasped in surprise. What is this? Reaching out his paw, Kian activated his power and dispatched the enemy. Then he snorted. The small fry has been caught. This is far from normal, but it seems this world too is filled with fear and killing intent. This gives him, the evil god, strength. If he kills all the inhabitants of this world, created by the creator god, his power should be restored even further. He will make his attacker regret sealing him away instead of getting rid of him outright. Kian activated his magic tracking and realized there were countless creatures possessing magic in the forest. Some are even more powerful than he is currently. But it seems his natural enemy, the ancient dragon, no longer exists. Apparently they thought one black dragon would be enough to guard the labyrinth. An ancient dragon, the mere memory of him makes his insides boil. In the age of the gods, he became a minion of the creator god, charged with destroying the lesser gods who refused to obey. Now he will gain power capable of crushing even an ancient dragon, and he will start by killing easy prey. He activated his magical vision, saw Lunor and the girls, and joyfully exclaimed, there are people in this forest too? Small creatures created by the creator god after he was sealed. They are insects writhing in the sun's rays. How should he get rid of them? First, he must capture them. Kian lunged at the elves, but the protagonist stopped him, and looking him in the eye, asked him, Is this the one who wants to kill his children? Kian was surprised. A human? What kind of magic is this? He is stronger than the ancient dragon he remembers. The protagonist raised him up. Kian activated his destruction ability and said, so, his human body will be completely destroyed. But MC easily handled his summoning and told him of interesting abilities. Kian exclaimed in confusion, why didn't his destruction ability work? Sigmund answered him that it worked, only his regeneration was higher. With such abilities, the attack could be negated. Kian shouted angrily, he's a god compared to him, a disrespectful human. The protagonist remarked in surprise, a god? He's the one worshipped by the holy kingdom of Zirad? Kian answered him irritably, he doesn't know where that is. The protagonist continued, he's different from ordinary monsters, but he doesn't seem so. So, there are different gods in this world? Until now, he hadn't felt any presence, and now it suddenly manifested itself? Did he emerge from the abyssal labyrinth? He hadn't felt its presence when he was there. Perhaps he didn't notice it because there were more powerful monsters there? Kian angrily responded, insulting a god. Suddenly his voice weakened and confused. He asked why his strength was leaving him. Was he absorbing his power? The protagonist activated the draining touch ability. Kian yelled at him. What is he doing? This is disrespectful. Make him stop. What does he want? If he wants more power, he can make him his vassal and gain protection. The protagonist laughed and said that making a weaker god his vassal wouldn't do him any good. Besides, wasn't he planning to kill his people? He wasn't going to let him get away with it. Kian was indignant. What did he say? MC, without another word, drained all his life force. After that, he said in a casual tone, now, maybe I should go home and pick some vegetables. Sometime later, in the Demon King's kingdom, Vandert was deep in thought, sighing heavily from time to time. Demolus asked him anxiously if something was bothering him. If he so desired, let him give Demolus an order. They would do everything possible. Abaddon suggested that the Holy Kingdom had done something wrong again. Vandert, with a heavy sigh, answered them. No, that was something else entirely. Demolus asked him if it might have something to do with Prince Berg. The Demon King remarked that the more time passed, the more he resembled his father. It seemed there was some kind of dispute in the palace today. That was true. Berg, the crown prince, chased an old man away from his place in the tavern and arrogantly told him it was his favorite place. Let him get out of here. The man wanted to protest, but his companion pointed out that it was His Highness Berg. Had he mistaken him? But the old man still indignantly asked the prince, what is he doing? He couldn't even stand in line? Berg angrily replied that if he had any grievances against him, they should be resolved like demons. His comrades led the old man away, and the prince's henchmen remarked admiringly, as expected of His Majesty, the true heir to the demon race. The prince said that since the beginning of his old father's reign, everyone had been talking about nothing but this, how they'd gotten to him. After all, power is supreme among demons. His grandfather Bar was the true demon king, and his father killed him with his cunning tricks. How could he forgive him? He will once again transform the demon kingdom into a powerful army. He will restore their glorious past. His comrades joyfully exclaimed, raising their glasses to the next generation of demon kings to Lord Berg. Vandert sighed. Demolus said that, as a demon himself, he understood why they were so drawn to power, and Berg was strong for his age. However, the Demon King and military officer Iglis were certainly strong as well. They still don't intend to defeat Abaddon. The Demon King said his father reigned as the Demon King. On the battlefield, he defeated enemies with overwhelming force. This happened because all domestic issues were also resolved, despite the fact that at the time the country was in turmoil. Abaddon noted that this was why the Demon King decided to overthrow Bar. He didn't know if Mr. Berg realized that it was a wise decision. Vandert said, this foolish son of his is even making public statements. It seems his rule is spreading across the continent. Many of his peers support him because their ideals are similar. 10 years have passed since the end of the war, and although the country had only just regained its composure, his son is causing such trouble. Abaddon and Demolus lowered their heads in embarrassment. The Demon King came to his senses and told them to forgive him. He wasn't complaining about them at all. It was all his fault. His father had once also ruled without being able to care for his children. He himself doesn't remember being raised by a father, and how should he treat him? Abaddon told him it wasn't his fault. He wished he could say something more frank, but it must also suit his temperament. His Highness Second Prince David must grow up peacefully. Vandert checked with him, right? So His Highness Berg doesn't know about the war. David came to the library. Berg called out to him, and the second prince asked him in surprise what had happened. He rarely came to the library. The first prince answered him that it was all because of his mother's lackey. He gave his younger brother his textbooks and ordered him to finish his section by tomorrow. This was probably the only thing he could do. David looked sadly at his brother's comrades and thought, his brother's lackeys, the Viscount's third son and the Count's second son. He told Berg that his future lay in becoming the Demon King, so it would be good for him to take charge of this himself. Berg asked him irritably, do you have any objections? Will this be of any use to him on the throne? All he'll need is strength. He's a demon. His comrades exclaimed, indeed, here he is, their Lord Berg. David thought with a smile, I see. These are the same people who can't claim the role of heir, and they are courting another. In a meritocratic demon kingdom, anyone can advance if they achieve success. It's foolish to run from strength. He told his older brother out loud that he didn't mind. Berg arrogantly called him a coward and proudly departed with his henchmen. The library caretaker emerged from behind the bookcases. David apologized to him for the noise. The caretaker replied it was no big deal. The second prince looked at the notes and said, well, business needs to be finished anyway. Meanwhile, Zul said thoughtfully, that's business. The assistant turned to her, the princess, and asked her forgiveness. The girl replied, it wasn't his fault. Let him go peacefully now. And yet, now she won't be so controlling. And anyway, she didn't want to disturb the king. Vandert himself had summoned her to discuss Berg's upbringing. The princess was surprised by the topic. The demon king had said, that's true. He had been thinking of asking Sebel for help. Zul looked puzzled, but he had also raised him, hadn't he? This child, he hadn't even shown up lately. Pouring herself and the king some wine, the girl took a sip and remarked that since he liked Sebel, it was worth listening to him. The demon king said thoughtfully, he really was good. He needn't worry about training, knowing that Sebel was in charge. But he was out of the country now, and it was unknown whether he would respond. The princess showed him the papers and invited him to look at these. The king, examining the papers, asked her, what is this? Zul replied, that was Berg's question. Vandert asked her if he had handled it poorly. The girl handed him a second sheet of paper and noted that David's answer was the one. The demon king compared their answers and crumpled the paper in anger, indignant. So Berg was forcing David to do his work for him? He would kill that boy. Zul tried to calm the demon king. She placed her hand on his and told him that if he quarreled with Berg, the already troubled country would erupt. Vandert was embarrassed and apologized for his outburst. The princess smiled and told him that while he was beautiful in his anger, he shouldn't react that way. He said that the title of Demon King is not hereditary. Only the most powerful demon in the country can become king. If a demon has more power than he, and if a claimant is offered to demons more useful than he, the successor can always take the position. Zul said she understood that. However, she would like her child to have the education to become king. After all, there is a bloodline through which the title of king was passed down to him. If the children are raised properly, then either Berg or David could become future kings. That's why a compromise is impossible. This is necessary to avoid the birth of another generation of His Majesty Bar. Vandert looked at her in surprise and said, it's true, he hadn't thought about that. And yet, be that as it may, David's answer is not bad. He's smart. He's heard about his academic performance. It's nice to see him succeed. Zul said with a smile, it's true. He's calm and popular among his subjects, and the teachers praise him. If only David had strength, there would be nothing to complain about. The Demon King agreed with the mother of his children. He added, I wonder if they'll be able to ask Sebel to teach David too? He even felt a bit sorry for him. Although perhaps this would be a great opportunity to teach him martial arts and show him the world. After some time, Sebel approached the protagonist, saying he would like to consult with him. Sigmund asked him what had happened. The butler replied that he would like to take a few days off. He had received a very interesting offer from the Demon King. The protagonist asked if he could find out what the offer was. The old man said that he would like both his heirs to receive short-term training. It seemed that his eldest son, heir Berg, respects the former Demon King. MC noted that the former Demon King had declared war on the entire world. Lifa responded that he was indeed seeking to unite the continent with the demons. Sebel added that Crown Prince Berg was said to be pursuing the same goal. The protagonist remarked, yes, that's very unpleasant. If Sebel began training him, would that mean he shared his ideas? And the request seemed urgent. What about the second prince? The butler asked. Was he talking about David? They say His Highness David has a gentle disposition and good grades. The protagonist was surprised. Wouldn't it be logical to make him the crown prince? Sebel said that to become king, one must have power equal to a demon. And if a demon doesn't have this power, other demons won't follow. He wouldn't be surprised if a rebellion broke out in the country soon. MC remarked, turning to Sebel and Lifa, by the way, would they be able to serve him after they saw his power? The three laughed. Then the protagonist told the butler that if he wanted, he could go to the demon kingdom. Sebel thanked his lord for this. The protagonist remarked, and about that offer, could he go with him? Both the girl and the butler exclaimed in fear, he shouldn't think about it. What's he thinking? This would break his heart, and not just his own but his heirs as well. MC asked them, confused, would it be that bad? What if he kept his presence a secret? He was so interested in watching Sebel. The old man, after thinking for a moment, agreed, saying, then it's decided. He added, however, that the master must under no circumstances reveal himself. Sigmund joyfully replied that he understood. After some time, MC and the butler watched the girls building a sandcastle. Finally they exclaimed, they've succeeded. The girls called out to the protagonist and Sebel to come see their creation. The protagonist, smiling, marveled at how enormous the palace was. The butler added, it's no less impressive than the Demon King's palace. Malula asked him in surprise. The Demon King's palace? The old man remarked. Yes, they've both studied the Demon Kingdom well. Malula exclaimed, That's where her older sister and grandfather lived, Sybil answered with a smile. That's right. There's a large palace in the demon kingdom where the king lives. Lalana asked him in surprise. A palace? Is there a princess there? The old man replied. Well, there's a prince there. Sigmund told the girls that Sybil would soon be going there to teach. The girls exclaimed, study. The protagonist laughed and answered, yes, he, Malula, and Lalana. The butler remarked, it's best not to tell their highnesses about this. The girls rejoiced. They'll be studying together with their brother. Sigmund said, well, it'll be a bit difficult. Malula was surprised. Why? Sybil replied, he'll be studying something they don't need. Lalana asked, puzzled. What's unnecessary? The butler said, they're already learning what Lunora's beloved daughters need, right? Just like the prince is learning what he needs as the heir to the demon kingdom. The girls groaned in disappointment. So, they can't learn this? The old man replied, can't isn't the right word. But is it right to learn something else when they haven't finished their training yet? Lalana exclaimed. I understand. Then she and her sister will be teachers too. It's more fun together. The protagonist laughed and said, excellent idea, and the lessons will be more interesting. Sybil asked him, don't do that. If that happens, it will hurt their highnesses' pride. The protagonist remarked, it would be a shame, indeed. He turned to the girls and suggested they postpone their teaching duties until another time. At that moment, Lunora called out to the children, shouting that Blanc and Noir had prepared sweets for them. The girls joyfully ran at their mother's call, washed their hands thoroughly, and sat at the table, eyeing the desserts with anticipation. Blanc told them they'd also made berry juice for them. The girls wished everyone a bon appetit and began eating. After tasting the sweets and juice, they exclaimed that it was sweet and delicious. Lunora thanked the maids, and the dolls sheepishly replied that it was their job. Malula and Lalana were important guests of their master, just like Lunora herself. The girl's mother smiled and said that thanks to everyone's care, these two are growing up healthy. They should appreciate it and not take it for granted. The girls exclaimed, yes, it's all thanks to their older brother Sigmund. Their mother suggested they practice living independently. After a while, Lifa said, so her grandfather is going to the demon kingdom to teach the Lord's children? He told his granddaughter he planned to hold classes on the outskirts of the abyssal forest, where he and she used to live. Incidentally, he had a favor to ask his master. Could he lend him Azur and Kugunochi? The protagonist was surprised by his words, but replied that he wouldn't mind. He would ask them both later if they agreed, but wouldn't the outskirts of the forest be safe without them? Sybil thanked him and said he'd like to ask for their help in training. There's a saying, a demon king must be strong. First, he wants the princes to train their endurance. MC laughed, noting Spartan methods though. The old man continued, those who break under such a test are of no use to the future demon king's country. This is necessary not only to control the demons, but also to restrain neighboring countries. A strong demon king serves as a deterrent for other states. Moreover, he will need the intelligence of a ruler. The protagonist said, it seems being a demon king is more difficult than he thought. Lifa handed him a cup of tea, which the protagonist gratefully accepted. Sipping, he continued, the current demon king must be very busy, right? Since he entrusted Seville with his training. The butler told him so. Sigmund exclaimed, he'll use Azur and Kugunochi's power, right? If he needs to scare the royal children, he can help. The butler reproachfully told him that his master was overstepping his bounds. MC was embarrassed and said he understood. After a while, Berg, sitting in the carriage, asked his henchman what his father was thinking. One of his friends remarked, is this their first time so close to the abyss forest? Iglis shouted to his subordinates, all clear, keep them on guard from here. The subordinates reported that they understood. A military officer turned to the prince and told him they were almost there. Berg apprehensively asked him, Father doesn't intend to kill them, does he? Iglis was indignant. What was he saying? His Majesty was acting solely in their interests. David thought, so he brought them here for their own good, along with his brothers. Although it was outside the country's borders, it was still quite far from the Western Union and the holy state of ISEKAI'D. Besides, their father had assigned Iglis, the commander-in-chief and one of the most influential men, as their guard. Of course, the abyssal forest was dangerous, but if they didn't go inside, it should be safe. He glanced out the window and noted, if he wasn't mistaken, it was somewhere around here. Finally, Iglis said, this is the meeting place. The princes were greeted by Sebel, who suddenly appeared. The commander-in-chief jumped in surprise and indignantly asked the old man not to appear so suddenly. His heart nearly stopped. David joyfully called out his future teacher. Sebel happily noted that they hadn't seen each other in a while. The second prince asked him how he was doing. He had so wanted to meet him. At that moment, Berg emerged from the carriage and irritably asked Sebel if he was the one who summoned him to such a remote location. As he could see, his old father's subordinate had become a very important person. David tried to stop his rude brother. Sebel responded with dignity, glad to see him in good health. Berg exclaimed indignantly, was he going to lecture him again? Sebel calmly, ignoring the first prince's attacks, invited them to his former home. One of Berg's friends exclaimed in amazement, wondering if there really was a home in such a place. The protagonist, watching the people from behind cover, looked at Iglis in surprise and said to Lifa, he'd seen him somewhere before. The girl replied that he was the commander-in-chief. He'd participated in the campaign to return slaves from the Sacred Kingdom. He also glanced at the princes. So these two were demon princes? They had completely different attitudes towards Sebel. Lifa explained to him that the eldest prince had been a fidget since childhood. They said his grandfather had scolded him more than once. The protagonist remarked, as expected of Sybil. The girl continued, and the younger Prince David, when her grandfather served in the palace of the Demon King, he gave him lessons several times. MC drawled, I see. I wonder what Sybil was going to teach them? Meanwhile, the butler turned to the princes and told them that the king had instructed him to give them both a lesson today. Berg exclaimed indignantly, what? And for this reason he had summoned him to such a remote place. How stupid. He turned to the commander-in-chief and called him out. Iglis glared at the prince and enunciated each word with authority. He will not return to the demon kingdom until he completes the lesson. Such are his majesty's orders. Berg was furiously indignant. What did he say? The commander-in-chief, grasping the hilt of his sword, said that if he was dissatisfied, he could try to escape by defeating him. Sybil thought, Iglis was now stronger than Prince Berg. This was the Demon King's plan. He knew Berg would submit if persuaded in the Demon Kingdom's style. Then out loud, he proposed that the brothers begin their lesson. He continued, the two of them were already receiving education as heirs to the throne. Therefore, first, he had a question for both of them. What, in their opinion, is the kingdom's current need? Berg was indignant. What a worthless question. What the demon race should strive for was determined long ago. It is overwhelming military might. The protagonist, surprised, asked Leaf, are all demons like this? The girl answered, it's not like there are many. Sybil spoke up, he understood everything. And what is Prince David's opinion? Does he share his brother's views? The second prince said solemnly that he believed the Demon Kingdom needed to expand diplomatic relations, develop trade with the Western Union, and develop its own industry. The protagonist looked at him respectfully from behind his hiding place. Berg was outraged by his brother's words. Trade? What was he talking about? David replied that he believed it was necessary for the prosperity of their kingdom. Berg exclaimed angrily, prosperity? What good was that? Wealth could simply be taken from those who had it. Their country had always done that, David countered. But hadn't that led to the kingdom's isolation and decline? The current kingdom would be incapable of fighting back if it provoked the sacred state of ISEKAI'D. Berg exclaimed angrily, that can't be true. Demons are the superior race. After all, their grandfather was the strongest. Why couldn't either his father or he believe in the strength of their people? David said thoughtfully, it's not that he doesn't believe in them, it's just that everything is obvious. The protagonist turned to Lifa and asked her if the Demon Kingdom invaded the neighboring countries. Would that mean declaring war on the Western Union, right? The girl answered that it was. The Demon Kingdom had a wide southern border, neighboring several countries in the Western Union. Sybil told the princes that in its current state, the Demon Kingdom was incapable of defending its borders or preventing an invasion. Berg countered, nonsense. The old man asked him, then, how do you envision the future of your kingdom? The lives of many subjects depended on the sovereign's decision. The first prince exclaimed, this is the unification of the continent. Everyone stared at him in surprise. Sybil asked, perplexed, the unification of the continent? And how? What is his strategy? Berg shouted, invade with all forces and crush everyone. Sybil looked at Iglis in surprise and asked him what he thought about this. The commander-in-chief replied that even with maximum mobilization, it was impossible to maintain combat operations on all fronts simultaneously. Berg was indignant. What was he saying? Didn't their grandfather fight for years against all countries at once? Iglis calmly replied that Prince Berg was not the late King Bar. Besides, the late king sacrificed many demons to maintain the front lines. He had no strategy. He simply wanted to personally take to the battlefield and crush the enemies. Because of this, he lost many intelligent comrades. Berg clenched his fists in anger. Sigmund asked Leaf, that's why. They say the current overlord killed the previous one, right? The girl answered that it was true. It was for the protection of the Demon Kingdom and its people. The first prince told the commander-in-chief, but power should be with those who have strength. Demons are the most powerful race on the continent. They should rule the entire continent. Iglis told him, he says strength? However, humans are inherently different from them. Demons. Strength alone cannot subdue them. Besides, what does he intend to do with an opponent possessing strength superior to demons? Berg confidently declared, there are no such things. Sybil said, really, and what about the forest of the abyss? At that moment, Basra appeared behind him and looked sternly at the princes. Sybil said, this is what true strength is. Berg's comrades cried out in fear. David remarked in surprise, Azra's tyrant bear? Sybil corrected him, or rather, Azra's great tyrant bear. Berg, panicked, shouted to his minions, they need to run, but at that moment, Kuganochi stood before them. From surprise and weakness, all three fell to the ground. The protagonist laughed along with Lifa, but then the protagonist noticed how David was looking at the bear. He said in bewilderment, amazing. This child was still conscious under the pressure of Acer and Kuganochi. What composure. He'd heard that David was reserved, perhaps possessing the makings of a future demon king. Sybil directed his magical power at Berg, who was thrown aside. He cried out in confusion, what's going on? Who are these monsters? David asked him if he was all right. The butler replied, these are his master's servants. David said in surprise, his master? Sybil asked, do they understand now? There are beings on this continent stronger than demons. Prince Berg still thinks they can be dealt with by force? The first prince's expression faded, bewildered. David asked the old man, so force alone isn't enough? Perhaps mighty warriors like Sybil could handle it, but he and the other citizens would never be able to attain power superior to their own. The butler remarked, however, that force shouldn't be neglected. It wasn't impossible, but it wasn't realistic. realistic either. Strength is necessary to maintain public order and protect against monsters and invasions. However, it's important to remember that once they use force to invade, they will be met with the same. After some time, the princes set off for home. Iglis saw a pensive David through the carriage window and told him he was asking him to think carefully about this. The second prince flinched in surprise. The commander-in-chief asked him how the teacher had taught him. David laughed and said, "He's still shaking. A pitiful sight, isn't he?" Iglis replied with a smile, "No, not just him. He felt a little uneasy too." David spoke up, realizing that demons really needed to learn methods other than military force. Berg silently looked at his comrades, who were still unconscious. The second prince looked out the carriage window and muttered, "Dwellers of the abyssal forest." Sometime later, in the Demon Kingdom's meeting room, Vandert asked his advisor how Berg was doing. The demon told him that the prince had locked himself in his room, sitting under the covers. Even when he told him it was time for combat training, he told him he wouldn't leave his room. It was safest here. If he did, he'd die. The advisor tried to talk him out of it, asking what he was talking about. That couldn't be happening. But the prince rudely told him to shut up. The demon, leaving, told him he'd always enjoyed attending combat training classes. Incidentally, the prince's comrades weren't showing up anywhere either. The second ghost advisor exclaimed if he was talking about Prince Berg's comrades. "They've been going to the library lately." The first advisor was surprised. "The library? Didn't they want to become soldiers?" The demon replied, saying they've decided to retrain as civilian officials. The first advisor was perplexed. "What happened during the last raid?" The demon king said, "Demolus. It seems the effect was too strong." The subject replied, "A golem and a great tyrant bear, even they who'd only seen them once were frozen with fear. It was no wonder the prince and his comrades were afraid." Vandert asked him, "Were they such formidable opponents?" Iglis replied, "Any one of them could easily destroy the entire country." The demon king was surprised. "A wooden golem? Couldn't it be defeated with fire magic?" The commander-in-chief said he doubted ordinary fire magic would work. Even the best fire mage in their country would be able to set it ablaze. The king exclaimed with a smile, "This is getting interesting." Iglis asked him not to do what he was planning. He added, "They exist in a completely different dimension of power." Vandert was perplexed. "Even Iglis says that? Then Master Sebel must be a being of an even higher order." Abaddon remarked, "Even if the teacher himself had sworn allegiance to him, that was probably true." The king asked his subjects, "What about David?" The first advisor told him he'd attended classes today and should be in the library now. The second prince was indeed there at the time. He glanced at the incoming visitors and noticed they were his brother's lackeys. But Berg himself was absent. He mentioned this to his comrades, and the count's son asked him where the martial arts books were. David replied that if they were interested, he recommended this book. With that, he handed them a textbook. Berg's comrades thanked him politely and left. The second prince waved to them, thinking about what he could do for this country, what power he must acquire, and what he aspired to. He needed to learn more about it. At that moment, Iglis was telling the king that David was magnificent. Even in his fear, he tried to maintain his composure and analyze the situation. Vandert, surprised, asked him, "Is this true?" The commander-in-chief continued, even questioning his teacher in the face of those two monsters. Although he was inferior to Lord Berg in strength, his fortitude was impressive. If he weren't a demon prince, he would have offered him the chance to become his apprentice. The demon king spoke thoughtfully, sounding both joyful and troublesome. Demolus asked him, "Is it because of Berg? In the Demon Kingdom, strength is everything. After all, not only the firstborn can become king, right?" Vandert replied that was true, but David was a calm child. After becoming the Demon King, one can't simply remain peaceful. Therefore, he needed to think further. "Are there any other demons who would like to become king?" Iglis replied that among the current military leaders, there was no one who could match the Demon King's strength. Abaddon said, "Of course, and among the civil servants too." There was a huge difference between the Demon King's lineage and the rest of the demons. The Demon King said it was probably true. Berg dreamed of becoming the Demon King and was cultivating his powers and the wisdom of a ruler. And if David became chancellor and helped him, it would be good for the country. Perhaps, if the first prince's mindset changed after this lesson, they might have a chance. Perhaps they should consult with Sebel again? Demolus asked the ruler if he relied on him too much. He was worried about hurting his feelings. The king countered, "Sebel is a kind demon." Demolus thought he was worried about angering the master Sebel served. He wondered what kind of creature he was. After some time, the protagonist, looking at the sapling, thoughtfully said, "Something's wrong." Tom activated his magic power, directed it at the sapling and asked the owner, "How about this?" The sapling began to transform before the protagonist's eyes. Sigmund exclaimed joyfully, "That's it!" Tom asked him to share his magic power. MC complied without a problem. The golem continued working on the sapling, and almost immediately the sapling transformed into a magnificent sakura. The protagonist exclaimed enthusiastically, "What an unusual tree!" He turned to Sebel and Lifa and asked if they knew what a sakura was. The butler replied, "Yes, although this variety is different. In the Demon Kingdom, wild mountain sakura grows naturally, and the fruit-bearing varieties are mainly grown for food everywhere." The protagonist noticed something like a cherry tree. "It would be nice to add that to the orchard." Lifa asked if this sakura was different. MC replied, "This one's for admiring. The snow should melt soon, right?" He thought it would be nice to have Hanami in the spring. Lifa asked him if Hanami meant flower admiring. Sigmund told her she understood correctly. He added that in his homeland, people drank sake while admiring the flowers. Sybil remarked, "It sounds very sophisticated." Lifa added, and cheerfully. The protagonist said it with a smile, although he himself had never done it. Since this is how it turned out, he would like to try it with everyone. The butler, surprised, replied that he would be happy to join him. Lifa asked the protagonist to trust her with the cooking. The protagonist thought happily that with Tom's skills, the blossoms would begin in a few days. Suddenly, he became wary and looked in one direction. The butler asked MC if something was wrong. Sigmund spoke. In the central part of the forest, magical energy began to stir, a slight vibration, but there was no unpleasant sensation. The butler remarked that, unlike that incident with the self-proclaimed god, there was no murderous intent here. The protagonist prepared to go check it out, and Lifa volunteered to accompany him. Activating the teleporter, the allies reached the location with lightning speed. A cave appeared before them. The protagonist exclaimed in surprise, "Is this the entrance to a dungeon? Wasn't it here?" The abyssal labyrinth collapsed and disappeared. He had completed it to the end. Sybil replied that dungeons don't collapse after completion. MC was surprised. "Is that true?" Lifa replied that dungeons have a core, similar to the monster's magic crystal, and only when this core is destroyed do they disappear. Sigmund looked puzzled, but he didn't remember destroying anything like that. The old man noted that dungeons created not naturally, but with a specific purpose, can disappear once they've fulfilled their purpose or become malfunctioning. According to legend passed down in the land of the Demon King, an evil god is sealed within the labyrinth of the abyss. The protagonist repeated in bewilderment, "An evil god? No, that couldn't be true. There were no signs of artificial magical influence." Sybil surmised that this dungeon must have formed naturally. MC said, "So it won't disappear, even if you complete it. Both monsters and dungeons appear suddenly in this world, right?" Lifa noted, "But that's good news. Monsters and items appear within the dungeon, so various countries send adventurers there to gather resources. They won't have to go shopping in town." Sigmund suggested that his allies check out what's inside. He added that if it turns out to be a dungeon where food ingredients appear, that would be fantastic. As they climbed up to the first floor, Sigmund said with anticipation, "It's so exciting to be back in a dungeon." They passed the second floor and climbed to the third. The protagonist noticed it was a bit cramped. Sybil told him it was because it was just forming. Lifa explained that dungeons grow by absorbing magical power. They attract animals, monsters, and people from outside, and absorb the magic they use inside, or the magic of those who die there. The Abyss Forest is a place with a high concentration of magic, so she believed the dungeon would grow quickly. Along the way, the allies encountered monsters with weak magical power. One of the rabbit-like monsters tried to attack Lifa, but the girl destroyed it with a flick of her fingers, dropping a chunk of meat. The protagonist, catching the piece, exclaimed, "This really could be profitable." Sybil, using his goggles of detection, noted that up to the third floor, mostly rat-like and rabbit-like monsters inhabited the area. The fallen meat was edible. The protagonist said that rats were certainly psychologically questionable, but rabbit meat would do just fine. He stored it in the Shadow Vault. MC turned to the old man and said, "He said that different countries send adventurers, so dungeons are in different places, right?" The butler replied that it was true. The structure depends on the magical power of the land, but they are scattered across different places. The Demon Kingdom has the most dungeons because it has abundant magical power and vast territories. This is one of the reasons why the Holy Kingdom considers the Demon Kingdom its enemy. Sigmund pointed out, "But doesn't ISEKAI'D itself have dungeons too?" Lifa said they do, but their land has little magical power, so the caves there can't develop much. She added that, according to rumors, a peculiarity of this land is that only undead-type monsters appear in the dungeons. MC thought about the undead, thinking there might be ghostly monsters immune to physical attacks. He knew that best. They're likely quite challenging opponents for adventurers. Lifa continued, "And the dropped items are also mostly difficult to handle. Items with effects, suspicious fabric, and rotten meat." The protagonist apologized for interrupting and said that even though it's called a sacred kingdom, the monsters inside are random. At least the magic stones can be used as materials for alchemy or magical tools, but they're not something you can use like meat or vegetables. Sybil said the fourth floor begins here. Climbing up, the protagonist exclaimed in delight, "Stone turtles and stone lizards, meat and sometimes minerals drop." The butler remarked, "This dungeon is a real gem. These are rare drops. But as the dungeon grows and the monsters become stronger, you'll be able to obtain rare minerals. It would be perfect if there was a zone with plant monsters." MC was surprised. Plant monsters? He meant traits and plantlets? Sybil answered that he did. As far as he knew, plant monsters are plants imbued with magical power and transformed into monsters. The items they drop depend on the plant they use as their base. Traits yield improved wood from the tree they were used as their base. Plantlets yield fruits, vegetables, and so on. Sigmund exclaimed with delight, "How interesting." The butler said he knew his master would be interested. After all, it's possible to obtain materials not found in their area. although they do have crops that he, their master, cultivates. Lifa added that that's true. Their crops are in no way inferior to those from high-level dungeons. The protagonist asked them if the harvest from the caves was tasty, because they're rich in magical power, of course. In high-level dungeons, kings, aristocrats, and wealthy merchants vie to get their hands on them. If their harvest is no worse, that's high praise for a farmer. When they return, they'll need to tell Kuganochi and Tom, who are in charge of farming. The 9th floor was the step zone. Lifa noted that it looked like the last floor. The protagonist said that, after all, there weren't many levels and no strong monsters. Sebel suggested that if it absorbed magical energy, the number of floors should increase. Sigmund replied, okay, he'll try. Activating his magical power, he thought, essentially, absorbing magical power from stray prey and directly releasing his magic should be considered the same thing. He asked the butler if he was doing everything correctly. Sebel replied, most likely. Sigmund remarked that the changes probably wouldn't be instantaneous. Is it okay if he takes it slow? The old man said, of course. Since this is his first experiment, let him entrust their support and observation. The protagonist noted that the lights will slowly return, releasing magical energy. After some time, the protagonist said he also became curious about the dungeons in other countries. Looking at this, he realized the landscape here was nothing like the labyrinth of the abyss. Lifa told him with a smile that this was the first time he'd shown interest in places outside the forest. MC replied, perhaps. Previously, he'd only been interested in materials. After some time, the allies appeared in the western lands, in the kingdom of Oifis, in the city of Kailari. The protagonist, using his concealment skill, marveled at how many people there are. Lifa told him this town was located right on the border with the demon kingdom, so it thrived on trade. For its size, it was a fairly ordinary town. Was that really so rare? The protagonist replied that it was simply his first time in a real human city. He'd spent much longer in the abyssal dungeon, followed by nearly 20 years of seclusion in the abyssal forest. Even though he'd lived in this world for so long, this was his first time in a human settlement. Sigmund added that he hadn't cared before, but after looking at the demon lords, he became interested in what was happening beyond the forest. He thanked the girl for accompanying him on this excursion. He simply wanted to see the town. Disturbing the peace of the locals wasn't part of his plans, so he used his stealth skills. But in this state, no one would notice their presence. He couldn't even buy food at the kiosk. He would slightly change his appearance. He wondered if Lifa's parents, who lived in this town, knew his true appearance. He didn't want them to find out about his foray into the town and start worrying. His disguise had to be impeccable. The protagonist assumed the appearance of a girl and exclaimed, that's better. Tourism wouldn't be tourism without stalls. They'd come to sample everything. Lifa was absolutely delighted with his disguise. He asked a man standing nearby for his wares and, after tasting them, said, just salt, but oh, how delicious. Lifa offered him something like a sandwich and told him to try it. The protagonist exclaimed, this is the first time I've seen such a dish. Taking a bite, Sigmund was surprised. It was sweeter than he thought and very tasty. Lifa told him that demons, humans, dwarves, elves, and beastmen live here, so the cuisine here is varied. There are even demon stalls. After trying another dish, the protagonist exclaimed, it's spicy and delicious. The girl explained that in the demon kingdom, many like it spicy. MC assumed it was probably because it was cold there. After eating, the allies continued their walk. Suddenly, a shop caught his attention. He asked Leaf if they sold magical tools there. Upon closer inspection, the protagonist noticed the tool was broken. Do they repair them before use? The girl answered him, no, few people know how to repair magical tools. They're simply sold as decorations. The protagonist exclaimed in bewilderment, what decorations? Leaf explained that almost all of these artifacts were found in ruins or dungeons. They don't work without repairs. Only a few simple artifacts have been repaired. Sigmund was surprised. So that's why they sell them as decorations? His estate is full of homemade magical contraptions. Leaf said, even the royal palace uses oil lamps or candles for lighting. Water is heated with wood in boilers. A bath is a luxury for the wealthy nobility once a week. MC answered, I see, so that's how it is. Suddenly, a boy named Kid bumped into the protagonist, who immediately jumped away and ran on. The protagonist shouted at him, is he okay? Kid replied, he's fine, please forgive him. Leaf looked at Sigmund and told him that the boy bumped into him on purpose. MC looked into one of the alleys, saw ragged and skinny children there, and remarked, street kids then. The girl said, this is quite common in fairly large cities. The protagonist asked her if there weren't any institutions here that would care for them. She told him that she remembered there was an orphanage in Kailari, but she didn't know where exactly. Meanwhile, Kid, who had bumped into the protagonist, cursed and muttered, this girl is small, but she didn't even flinch. He got scared and ran away before he could cut the wallet. At that moment, the protagonist called out to him, and before the boy could get scared, MC placed a gold coin in his palm and told him he had business with him. And don't even think about running away, okay? Kid looked at the protagonist in confusion and asked him what he wanted from him. After a while, Kid led Leaf and MC to the place Sigmund had asked him about. The boy told them they had arrived. The protagonist asked him if this was a church orphanage. Kid answered that it was. It was run by an old nun named Dora. He brought them here, and from then on, they're on their own. okay? MC asked him in surprise, will he come in with them? The boy replied negatively, adding, he could see for himself that it was total devastation. There wasn't enough money to feed the whole gang. If he were here too, it would be an extra burden for Dora. At that moment, the orphanage door opened, and Dora peered out with a surprised gasp. She greeted Kid and asked him if he'd brought his friends. The boy answered solemnly, it's work. He was a guide. Sigmund greeted her and said they'd asked Kid to bring them here. The woman invited them inside. The protagonist apologized for the disturbance. Dora seated them at the table, poured tea for the guests, placed cookies on the table, and said the children had baked them themselves. The neighbors really liked their delicacies, but she apologized for having the cheapest tea. The allies pounced on the cookies, eating them with relish. The protagonist thanked the kind woman for the treat and remarked that the cookies were delicious. Dora smiled and told him she was very happy about it, and the children would be too. MC looked at the children under his care and said there were a lot of human children here. Lifa answered that it was true, there were almost no demon children here. Demons live long lives and are not particularly eager to reproduce, so their birth rate is low. Dora asked them if they were looking for a child to adopt. Sigmund told her that was not the case. He wanted her to take care of Kid. The boy and Dora herself were very surprised by this. The protagonist poured a handful of coins onto the table and added that there was one more thing. He wanted to make a donation to the orphanage. Would she accept it? Dora, with tears in her eyes, told him of course. She would prepare all the necessary documents. Kid scolded her, asking why she was crying. Was she so happy with a pile of money? The woman, wiping away tears of gratitude, said that with them she could save Kid and many other children. After some time, the protagonist apologized to Lifa for dumping all the paperwork on her. The girl responded enthusiastically, saying she was honored that he had entrusted her with this. Sigmund noted that the children looked emaciated. It seemed orphans were in the same situation everywhere. Next time, he would bring them vegetables and meat. Lifa responded touchedly, he's very kind. The protagonist countered that this wouldn't solve the problem at its root. He was simply stroking his ego. When they returned to the estate, Seville asked them how their walk through the city had been. The protagonist replied that it had been fun, although it had given him a lot to think about. He wanted to learn more about the world beyond the forest. He turned to the butler and asked him if he was good at explaining things. Would he give him a lesson so that even he would understand? Seville asked him in surprise. The Lord wants him to give him a lesson? Although with his power, he could create the laws of this world himself. The protagonist objected. No, what is he talking about? Noir and Blanc pointed out that this wasn't fair. They wanted to learn too. Blanc added that she and Noir would have to go shopping in the city in the future. Noir remarked that she thought he and Blanc also needed to gain some common sense. MC thought, Sybil and Lifa are always going shopping or running errands in the Demon Kingdom, and now he's out there too. Maybe they were just jealous? He petted them on the head and said that he understood. The butler replied, okay, for Noir and Blanc's sake he'll give the lesson. So where should they start? Sigmund said. He and Lifa went to the church orphanage and explored the church. There were several divine statues there. Was that normal? The butler answered. Yes, it's common in the kingdom of Oifis. Elves, humans, beastmen, dwarves, demons, each race worships its own god. Therefore, churches in countries where different peoples live have multiple altars. The protagonist said, so they have polytheism. Sybil noted exactly. The only ones who don't recognize other gods are the holy kingdom of ISEKAI'D. From their point of view, their gods are equivalent to the evil god. The protagonist mused, the evil god then. I believe they say the evil god is sealed somewhere here, in the forest of the abyss, right? Although, he's never seen him. The old man replied, in fact, legends of the evil god exist all over the world. They say that a god who breaks the laws and falls becomes an evil god. It's believed that the other gods stripped him of his power and sealed him away. However, he hadn't heard of the seal's exact location, nor of it being removed. Blank asked him if he thought it was just a fairy tale. Sebel said it was entirely possible. MC muttered thoughtfully about the seal. The butler continued, saying that the seal of the evil god was believed to be guarded by an ancient dragon. Sigmund asked him in surprise, an ancient dragon? The old man continued, it's not from the continent. It's a divine messenger, living on the continent of dragons. They say that if the evil god awakens, a dragon will come to this continent to destroy it. The protagonist thought, speaking of the dragons he knows in this world, the final boss of the Labyrinth of No Return is a black dragon, and there was a dragon guarding the seal, and an evil god, stripped of his power and sealed away. And to top it all off, the Labyrinth, destroyed because of him. It all fits together. He said out loud, he doesn't know the truth. And he doesn't plan to cross paths with the evil god in the future, so it doesn't matter to him. Since the existence of the evil god is unconfirmed, does that mean this world is currently safe? Sebel, Noir, and Blanc looked at him in confusion. Then the butler said, no, there are threats. After the death of the previous demon lord, major threats truly disappeared. Of course, minor skirmishes between countries do occur. And that same holy kingdom of ISEKAI'D is precisely the seat of discord. Information from that country doesn't reach him, like a demon. The protagonist remarked that to find out more, he'd have to send a spy. And if he turns into mist and flies there to investigate, he could learn much more. The butler and the dolls simultaneously exclaimed, no way. MC muttered in bewilderment, why so categorical? He could turn into a bat or a wolf, and they wouldn't find him. Sable again gave him a categorical negative. He told him that if someone of his level accidentally leaked magical power, it would be disastrous. MC exclaimed, "Well, he's exaggerating." Noir said, "Even a trace of his aura could lead to casualties." The protagonist hung his head dejectedly, upset. At that moment, Malula and Lalana exclaimed, "School is over. Is their brother going to school too?" Lenora hurried after the girls and reproachfully told them not to run around the house. She apologized to Sigmund for interrupting him. The protagonist assured her that everything was fine. He praised the girls for studying hard. Malula told him they were studying plant leaves today. It turns out they make medicine from them. MC laughed and exclaimed, "Wow, so if he gets hurt or sick, they'll cure him?" The girls also laughed and replied, "Leave it to them," Lenora told her daughters, but for that, they still have a lot to learn. And weren't they supposed to play with Shiro and Kuro today? The girls turned their attention to the magical cats and suggested they go outside. As the girls ran off, the protagonist noticed they were especially enthusiastic lately. Noir told him they found the picture book he'd gotten earlier, and now their goal is to reread it themselves. The protagonist uttered, "Ah, that very book." Lenora said that when they were nomadic, she was so busy with her daily work that she couldn't give them a proper education. They seemed to enjoy gaining new knowledge and learning new skills. MC asked her if nomadic life was really hard. The woman answered that it was. Even simple food was difficult. Looking after the livestock, hunting for meat, crafting household items, all this alone took an entire day. They were in constant fear of monsters and bandits who could appear at any moment. Although, of course, there were more difficulties than just that. The protagonist, looking at the girl's mother, thought that she must be considering far more things while she remained here than he could imagine. First and foremost, for her girls. Sybil, watching the gentleman, anxiously asked him if something had happened. Sigmund answered that no, he simply thought Lunora was amazing. The woman, hearing his words, exclaimed in confusion, "That's not true at all." A few days after returning from the human city, MC said he was thinking of going to another country next time. Sybil asked him, "Then how about the Demon Kingdom?" The protagonist exclaimed, "Exactly. So he'd be going there this time." Noir and Blanc told their master they were going too, so they'd know where to shop in the future. The butler remarked, "That's a good idea. Then, let them give them a general knowledge lesson about this kingdom." He thought 3 days would be enough to learn the basics. The protagonist muttered in surprise, 3 days. Sybil asked him if something was wrong. MC replied that everything was fine. In fact, he thought he'd be skipping classes and farming. 3 days later, they arrived in the Demon Kingdom, in the city of Bastal. Noir and Blanc were amazed by the sight and size of the city. Sigmund asked Lifa if this city, right on the border with human lands, was a front line during the war, right? The girl replied that now, like in Kailari, representatives of a wide variety of races live here. The protagonist remarked with amazement that they had been at war for 10 years, and yet there were still no conflicts. Lifa explained that for a demon, a change of scenery with a new demon lord was perfectly natural. She didn't know what other races thought, but relations between the countries were currently quite good. The protagonist drawled, perhaps owing to the current lord's wise rule. The allies strolled leisurely through the city. Blank marveled at how many different buildings there were. Lifa explained that this was because demons varied greatly in size. Arachnes like herself, ogres, werewolves, and even giants lived here. MC added that the size and lifestyle dictate the building standards, something worth taking note of. He saw one of the inhabitants and asked Lifa in surprise, "Is that the lizard-like man?" The girl replied that it was a draconian. Considering them lizardmen who are monsters was an insult. Sigmund was surprised. Really? He would keep that in mind. As they walked further, the protagonist and the dolls grew more and more amazed. MC said that even among giants, it turns out, there are so many different tribes, and if you don't count the demons, there are humans, beastmen, and elves too, and dwarves are visible. Are elves and dwarves rare here? Lifa replied that elves rarely descend among humans, but dwarves are highly valued as blacksmiths, so you can often meet them in any thriving forge. Noir remarked that they were strong and resilient, so some of them became adventurers, right? Lifa told her that was true, and praised her for remembering her grandfather's lessons well. As they continued walking, the protagonist remarked that he didn't see any homeless children around here. The girl told him it was thanks to His Majesty's decree, which, after the war, ordered the opening of orphanages in all regions. The state and wealthy merchants united to actively support and protect those who had lost their families in the war. The protagonist was surprised. Did the rich just agree? Lifa said with a smile that it was the demon's nature to obey the strongest that helped. It's a very convenient instinct at times like these. Besides that, there are many other differences between humans and demons. Many demons are naturally gifted with abilities tailored for combat. They can hunt monsters themselves and forage for food that drops as trophies. And the basic diet varies among tribes, so there's no shortage of any one food item. Sigmund noted, so they're less likely to starve than humans? The girl mentioned the difference in population size. The protagonist remembered, yes, she'd said demons had a low birth rate. Noir was surprised. In that case, shelters in the Demon Kingdom should be operating without a problem. Lifa looked at her and replied, until they see it with their own eyes, they won't know. The allies continued on. Finally, Lifa told them they had arrived. Their main objective for today was the Bastal Church. The protagonist and the dolls looked at the tall building in surprise. The girl continued, The shelter is right behind the church. The protagonist froze in front of the church entrance. Blank asked him in surprise, will he go inside? MC answered, actually, he's undead. The doll said sheepishly, that's true. She sometimes forgets that herself. He figured he had resistance to holy magic, so he wouldn't take any damage. But based on his instincts, it was best not to go there. He didn't want to upset the believers. The protagonist resorted to a trick. He activated the teleporter, and together with his allies, bypassing the church, found himself at the orphanage gates. He opened the door, apologizing to the owners. Maria came out to greet them, looked at the guests in surprise, and told them she would now call the manager. Please have them wait here. The girl left, and the MC noted that they were clearly wary of them. Then, while there was still time, they needed to do something. He activated his vault and pulled out a purse full of money, handing it to Leaf. At that moment, the manager, Rosalie, appeared with Maria and said with a smile, do they have guests? The woman introduced herself and said she was the manager of this orphanage. What was their reason for coming here? Curious children peered through the open doors. Leafa apologized to Rosalie for the disturbance and the sudden visit and told her they had come to make a donation to their church. The woman beamed and thanked them for it. Leafa handed her the purse. When Rosalie and Maria saw the number of coins, they asked the newcomers in confusion, that much money? Were they sure about that? Leafa told them, of course. They also brought food. Please let them take that too. Maria, perplexed and embarrassed, told them they had nothing with which to repay them. Did they understand that? The protagonist replied, His demon majesty ordered active support. The girl's face turned pink. He noted that she seemed to believe it. A little later, when the allies were treated to tea, the protagonist remarked, there are so many human children here. Rosalie added, almost all of them are human. This town is very close to the border. The demon kingdom is now under stable rule. It seems the human lands are full of those who can no longer survive there, and these people, seeking their last hope, flee to them. Among them are children abandoned by their parents. Those who risk their lives to cross the border live here, as do those who lost their parents in this town. Sigmund said sadly, is that so? Maria said they were too careless. Demon society operates by the law of strength. Did they really think defenseless human children could survive in such a country? If not for Sister Rosalie's selfless devotion, none of them would have survived. Rosalie turned reproachfully to her assistant, who became embarrassed, apologized to the guests, and added that she had lost her cool. Sigmund assured her that nothing terrible had happened. Rosalie said Sister Maria had grown up here too. Not only she, but many other foster children who had grown up and started working, helping them in their free time. It was only thanks to this that they had survived thus far. The old woman took the protagonist's hands in hers and told him that, thanks to their sacrifice, things would be much easier for them. A huge thank you to them for their help. MC sheepishly replied that there was nothing to thank them for. He was glad if it had helped even a little. A little while later, the allies decided to do something for the orphanage too, and they began cooking. The protagonist asked Leaf if life in the demon kingdom was really hard for people. She replied that there was always work for healthy adults. The war was over, industry was booming, so there was a labor shortage. He noted, but it was more difficult with children, right? The girl simply replied that it was. The protagonist said, I see. At that moment, a child approached him and asked if he would work. Sigmund smiled and told him, no, that's not quite what he meant. And anyway, let him not call him uncle, just brother, okay? The child agreed and asked Leaf if she was a new nun. The girl sheepishly replied, not at all. Then the child turned to Blank and asked her what she was making. Soup. The doll said she was making soup. The little boy exclaimed happily, that's so cool. The main character added, there'll be meat too. The child's delight knew no bounds. The other children approached him and stared expectantly at the guests. MC asked them if they wanted to cook together. The children happily answered yes. And so, with jokes and merriment,